This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, today we've got a very special guest on the podcast. His name is Sam Hazewinkel. So Sam is a member, or was a member, of the 2012 U.S. Olympic team. He was a freestyle wrestler on that team. He was also a four-time All-American at the University of Oklahoma. And he also, this is really cool, made the United States World Greco Wrestling team at the age of 36, which is like decrepitly old for wrestling, but that is a super impressive accomplishment. He currently serves as the head coach for the Regional Training Center here in Oklahoma. And also, if that name sounds vaguely familiar, it's because he's a member of my personal foxhole. So you hear me guys talk about all the time, building your own foxhole, like how to build a godly and manly foxhole. Well, he is Sam the Coach. So if you go back to episode 104 of this podcast, I talk about some of my thoughts about Sam the Coach. So this is a great personal friend of mine. We did an in-person conversation. Sorry, there's no video for this one. We were recording in kind of a different studio and all that, so we could be in front of each other, and there was no real way of doing video. But we talked about a lot of things in this podcast. But before I get into what we talked about, you might be tempted to skip this one. Okay, because it's wrestling and maybe you didn't wrestle or you don't really know much about wrestling. There's a lot of really great things for you to look at and to think through that have nothing to do with wrestling whatsoever. Okay, so we talked about what it was like for him having a father and an uncle that were both Olympic wrestlers, right? We talked about the entire process and got kind of a behind the scenes look at what it was like to be an Olympian for the 2012 Olympics, what it was like in London, which was really, really cool. We also previewed the 2021 Olympic freestyle wrestling and kind of got some gold medal predictions. We did a behind the scenes look at the crazy Jayden Cox weight cutting scandal that happened during the U.S. trials. He was actually there while this was all happening. He was near all those wrestlers, so we got an inside look at that. Also, his thoughts on American athletes that are protesting the country that they're pretending to work for or serve. Also, his thoughts on, weight cutting for children wrestlers and, whether or not young boy wrestlers should wrestle against young girls. But towards the end, he goes through this crazy story, and I've heard him tell it before, but there's a crazy story where his wrestling training almost cost him his life. Okay? Like, insanity. And you're just going to have to stick around to check that out, guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. Sam Hazewinkel, welcome to Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, you should be excited because this is actually the first time I've been in the same room with the person I was doing the interview with. So we're going to be able to
We're the first?
Yes. We're going to be able to interrupt each other. We're going to be able to, literally, if you want to poke me in the eye or shoot a takedown while we're doing all this, it's all available to you. So
I'm going to be knee fighting for the space you do on an airplane.
No, that's why I sat right here so that you couldn't get there. I know you guys can't see us on video right now, but there is a gap big enough between us to where I'm not too terribly worried. Because here's the thing. We're going to be talking about a lot of wrestling today. So guys, and I told y'all here in the intro that even if you're not into wrestling, this is going to be an interesting conversation because whenever you can get into the mind of somebody that has made the sacrifice to be an Olympian, that's a pretty important thing. And that's a pretty amazing thing for everyone to be around. But just to kind of even start off with you, Sam, it seems like from an outside observer, you didn't really have a choice in whether or not you were going to be a wrestler because your dad and your uncle were both Olympians, right? So, did you feel like you had a choice? Could you have just picked up golf if you wanted to?
Yeah. I loved it. My dad's rule was you got to be in a sport or you got to have a job. And so wrestling was the sport. That was the easiest. But high school, my brothers did football and got jobs. And I think I'm the only one that wrestled in college and maybe the only one that wrestled all the way through high school.
Okay.
One brother might have.
So when did you start wrestling?
I don't remember.
Actual formal, putting on a singlet, going to tournaments, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't remember. As long as I can remember, I was wrestling in tournaments, 3 or 4, something like that.
Okay. Did you feel since your dad and your uncle were obviously big, influences in your life, did you feel like I know I kind of already asked this, but did you feel like you had the option to do something else? Or was it literally just wrestling just agreed with you so much it didn't even matter?
Yeah, it didn't matter for me. My brothers would say that they felt like they needed to, at least up through high school. They didn't feel that way in high school, but when we were kids, I don't know that we had much of a choice. We had to go to wrestling practice. Okay.
So was that something that you resented, or was that something that, because again, when you look back, oh, my mom and dad, they forced me to do this, or they forced me to do that. Like, it's kind of easy to get a little jaded about that. But like, when you were living it, did it feel like you were kind of under their thumb, like you absolutely had to?
No, because I loved it. I mean, I had the days like any kid where you don't want to go to practice and your parents make you. But it was never like a whole season or a month where I didn't want to go and couldn't stand it and felt like I was being forced. My brothers, again, would probably say yes.
Right.
They felt a little more like they were forced to. But
so how did that affect your relationship, like with your brothers? Because like, I know there's all kinds of familial dynamics. And of course, like you've got your own kids and, we've got our one and, hopefully more. And, there's always those dynamics like, oh, is mom or dad like favoring this kid or that kid, or like, oh, they're only doing that to make dad proud or something like that. So did that ever kind of create issues with you and your siblings that they weren't as into it as you were?
Probably.
Okay.
I know I seem ultra aware of everything going on around me, but I don't think I was as a kid. I was very narrow-minded, focused, I was going to make an Olympic team, so I was focused on wrestling and didn't really notice my brothers hated it too much or didn't like it, or if dad was leaning toward me because we liked the same thing,
right?
Which I'm sure happened.
So like at what age did you, I guess, make the idea in your brain like you wanted to be Olympian? Because when I was a little kid, it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, but I also wanted to be a soldier. I also wanted to be an astronaut. Like you want to be these things, but
right.
Like at what age or kind of what time period of your life can you remember? No, I'm going to be an Olympic wrestler.
As far back as I can remember.
Okay.
I would play with my dad's Olympic ring, put on his clothes. Like I knew I was going to be an Olympian, and I thought every kid did that. Like I knew every kid wanted to be everything,
right?
But I thought they all wanted to be an Olympian, and for me, it was easy. That was what I was going to do, and I didn't really ever want to be anything else. I never wanted to be a fireman or whatever.
Okay. So with the kids that you were growing up with that were like your teammates or anything like that didn't have Olympians like living in their same house or showing up at the family barbecue, did you see some of those kids kind of make that same declaration? Like, I want to be an Olympian, I want to do that thing. Like, or was that just not, was it so outside the norm? Because like, for me to say I want to be an Olympian, like no one in my family is even an athlete, much less an Olympic athlete, right? So like, did you feel like that? Oh yeah, get out of here. You haven't been to my family reunions. You wouldn't be impressed, I'll tell you that much. But did that have something to play into it? Like, did they kind of have the same goal, even though they didn't have the same family set up?
In wrestling practice, yes, we were good. We had a good team. Like at church, at school, no, that was like the normal. I want to be an NBA player. Okay. I'm like, okay, go for it.
Well, so with that, there's a lot of people that have goals, right? So I say this all the time, like, people like talk a lot about goal setting. I think the second podcast of this podcast was about manly goal setting. It was the second or third podcast. Like, but winners and losers have the same goals. I love that quote. Like I think that's the only quote from the Atomic Habit books that I've like remembered, because the book was just kind of but like winners and losers have the same goals. And so for you, like, do you remember a time in your life where it's like, okay, this isn't just my goal, but this is within reach? Because I think for a lot of people, like when I topped out at 5'10", so did most of my Major League Baseball aspirations. There's not a whole lot of dudes below, 6 foot tall that make it into the majors, regardless of how good they are. So like for you, did you have a time period where like, no, I realized that this is possible within my reach?
Yeah, I think I always felt that way. My dad was Olympian. I figured I had better coaching, better chances than anybody else. And I won everything. My brother, on the other hand, took third at everything. He just always was third, didn't like it, didn't think he could make it. And looking back, he lost to Johnny Hendricks every week. Okay. It was pretty good.
Yeah, he's not bad.
Yeah, he's not bad. But at the time, my brother's like, man, I'm never going to win. So he didn't like wrestling so much. He got out of it, didn't do it in high school. And so for me, I always thought so.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point, because when you look at certain people, like, can you imagine being the guy at the same weight class as Cale Sanderson at Iowa State, right? Like you're just, because you didn't know he was going to be what he was like when he got there. Like you maybe had some ideas that this guy's going to be pretty good, may be an All-American, may win some national titles, but you didn't think undefeated, 4 years, running of national titles. Imagine being that guy, but imagine that being in like junior high. Like the guy that you're trying to, wrestle, to just make the team, just to be the starter for the team or whatever, like, the challenge matches and stuff, like that's got to be like crazy,
Yes. I was trying to set records in high school. I wanted to have the most takedowns in the state, and I wanted to have the most pins. And so I would take every kid down 5 times before I'd pin them.
Right.
And man, I talked to a guy the other day, just random. He's like, "Oh yeah, I wrestled you in high school. It was like my first week out, and you scored like 57 points on me, and I quit." And I was like, "Oh man, that's not what I was going
Way to
for."
Go.
Like,
way to go, Sam.
It's not
You're
at all
supposed to
what I
spread the
wanted.
love of wrestling, not like destroy people's hopes and dreams.
Yeah, it's funny how you don't think that way at all when you're a kid. And
so, where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Florida.
Okay, and so like I know that every state kind of has their thing, and Florida, Texas, California, those are more like kind of the college football, like or high school football areas, and then Iowa, Oklahoma, you might get a little bit more wrestling. So what was it like in Florida for wrestling? Was that like, were y'all good at wrestling? Is that like a Florida thing, or was that something else?
No, they were not good, especially coming from Oklahoma. Went to Florida and just kind of walked through it, and they got a lot better right as I finished. Wrestling in Florida got a lot better. And I'm going to claim it. It was all me.
Yeah, it was a
high school kid.
Exactly. Yeah, you're the one that started. But you were undefeated in high school, right?
I was undefeated in high school.
Okay.
3-time state champ.
Okay, so was that
always fun to figure out?
Right, exactly. Well, I'm assuming if you didn't lose that, unless you quit right before the end, which we've seen in the Olympics here recently. But with that in mind, like, I guess were you ever in trouble in any of those matches? Because was it just you just took people down, cut them, and took them down, and then eventually pinned them?
Yeah, and in Florida, I don't think I was ever in trouble.
Okay.
I was a little, I'd say a level ahead. Now, I go to national tournaments and I was in trouble. I had a lot of close matches, and but within Florida, wasn't. Yeah.
So whenever you said that just reminded me of something. I think I've heard Chael Sonnen talk about this, about like Yoel Romero, and he kind of talks about the differences between like the American wrestling teams and the Cuban wrestling teams. And like the American teams, like they're trying to beat you by as much as possible and get to the pin as quickly as possible, and effort, go. Whereas like Cubans and Russians and all that, like, he would talk about Yoel Romero in some of these, Olympic matches, like he would just wait similar to his MMA career, and he would just explode when he needed to, but he would never give more effort than what was minimally necessary for him to win that match. Like, so do you feel like it kind of seems like you were way more on the latter spectrum, or the prior spectrum, where it's like you wanted to just absolutely obliterate these people and leave no doubt? Yes,
I leaned that way. I will say by the end of my career, I leaned more toward Romero style. Like I tried to be smarter. Part of that, I was getting older, but a big part of it was conserving energy, being smart.
Right.
You're going to win the Olympics. Everything matters, and so the U.S. leans that way because Iowa back in the day, Dan Gable, and that was their stick. It's still their stick now. We're the toughest, we're the meanest, and everybody wanted to be Iowa, so that became the focus across the nation. But you see it at the higher levels; they get smarter, you know.
Well, the thing that kind of brings up is because you'll see that, especially in, we're right in the middle of the Olympics right now, and you'll see someone kind of take it easy on the semifinal thing. But then you'll see other people that just go balls out in the semifinal and the final and win. And so I guess it's just different for everybody because everybody kind of has their own gas tank. But one thing before we move on from high school, so undefeated high school wrestler, for you growing up in a state where, wrestling isn't worshipped like it is in Iowa, or, basketball in Indiana or something like that, was that good for you in high school? Were you like a recognizable, jock athlete kind of thing because you were the undefeated wrestler? Because there are some schools, like we had some really good wrestlers at the schools that I grew up in, but we weren't like known for having this lineage and legacy of wrestlers. And so these were just kind of almost underappreciated athletes. Whereas the guy, that was a decent, running back for the football team, maybe got a little bit more play. Like for you, like, did that kind of bring you some plaudits from your, classmates or teammates or something?
Not at all. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Wrestling's never been big. Most people didn't know anything about how good I was, or anybody on our team, or, just wrestling in general. It's never been a big fan sport.
Right. That's why whenever you hear people talk about wrestling in such hallowed terms, it's because it's not this grand, glorious thing. I mean, you have Jordan Burroughs, and we'll talk a lot more about Jordan later. But, when you have a guy like that who's trying to like make a career out of wrestling and things like that, and it's like, well, in America, there's not really a market for that as much. And, you got to go overseas and do those types of things to kind of make a career. But, we'll get more into Jordan here in a bit. But for you, obviously undefeated high school wrestler, 3-time state champion. Tell me about the recruitment process, because you ended up at OU, which, doesn't have, just in the state of Oklahoma, doesn't have kind of the reputation of being like the wrestling school. Because, hey, I'm just saying, I told you about the separation on the table. I can at least run away.
You live next to Hardell.
Hey, I do live next to Hardell Moore. Hey, he's an alum of the podcast, so shout out to Hardell.
Love that dude.
Yeah, he's a great dude, great coach. But I mean, obviously, Oklahoma State's kind of one of the dominant forces, probably, if not, the consensus greatest wrestling school in collegiate wrestling history. It has the
most national titles.
Yeah, most national titles. I mean, not as much lately. It's more of a Penn State thing lately. So take us through kind of the recruitment process, what that was like, and the decision to end up at OU.
Yeah, I knew I was going to go back to Oklahoma. I wanted to wrestle in Oklahoma. I looked at OU, OSU, and Minnesota. I had family in Minnesota. Wanted to check them out. I always liked them. Actually called Iowa because I wanted to see what all the hype was about. And they were like, no, we got a 25.
Okay.
And we're not going to bring you in. Not going to give you a chance. No. So I made sure to always beat up Iowa anytime I wrestled them.
And so how did that go? Like, we're skipping ahead a little bit, but how did that go whenever you would wrestle their 25er?
Yeah, I always beat them in college. We didn't wrestle them much though. I'd see them at national duels or at nationals, and that was it.
Right.
I think 2-0. I don't think I wrestled them much at all.
Gotcha. So to kind of circle back, I keep sending you on tangents.
Yeah, it's all right.
But like when why did you kind of end on OU?
So I really liked the team. They had more Christians. I'm very religious, and they were less like cliquish.
Okay.
Where OSU was very cliquish. I didn't even see some of the starters. Like I was a redshirt freshman was the guy that was taking me around, and that's all I saw was other freshmen. And also, I worked out at each school, and OU was the only school that I got beat up at.
Okay.
I beat the guy at OSU. I beat the guy at Minnesota, and I wanted to go where I was going to get beat up and get better. So that was a big part of it.
When it seemingly worked out because you're a 4-time All-American, but similar to kind of what I talked about with Hardell, one of the big things about Hardell's story is, the fact that he was a national, finalist, but he was runner-up. Like he got the silver medal, as it were, in terms of that. And so for you, you never actually won the whole shebang, right? So it's nothing to nothing to give somebody like a demerit or something like that. I mean, you're a 4-time All-American at a big time school, and that's a great thing. But kind of take me through that process of like never actually getting through to the ultimate goal, which was actually being a national champ.
Yeah, I felt like I should have won every year. I took third as a freshman, lost in the last 2 seconds of the semis, and that guy teched the guy in the finals. So I felt like I could win it every year. And I never quite got over the hump. NCAA is a tough tournament, and I did the same thing for world teams, Olympic teams. I took second 5 or 6 times, and that was a real monkey on my back, and it was never a concern. I've always been confident. Every year I felt like I was going to go in and win, and but at the same time, it's in the back of your head like another second, like how do I get over the hump? And I didn't feel like it was a mental, but I got to do something to get over the hump. And I actually did a year of sports psychology. Which I thought helped. It was not at all what I thought. I thought it was, I don't know what I thought. All the things that come with psychology and seeing a psychiatrist. And I met with the girl at OU, and she knew nothing about the sport, and it worked out great. Why? And I remember one of the things, I had it in my head there for probably a year and a half that I hated being ahead with 20 seconds left. I felt like I lost way more when I was winning by a point than when I was losing by a point. And it's funny how the mind works, because I know I can't tell a coach that, right?
Yeah,
they're going to yell at you, and you're in your own head like, man, they won't understand. Like, it's for sure. Like, look at all these matches. And I had myself convinced, like, I would go after a guy with a minute left if I was up by 1. And I'm either going to get up by 3 or give up a dumb takedown, be down by 1, because my odds of winning go up. And on paper, I was probably right. But, like, you can't have that mindset, right? And so I told her that. And as soon as I said it out loud, it was like the spell was broken. I was like, man, who would ever want to be losing with 20 seconds left? Like, it makes no sense. No one would ever say that. And immediately the spell's broken, and I'm moving on. And then I started winning all those matches. Didn't stress me out being up by a point anymore. And
right
now, I mean, who wouldn't want to be up a point?
Well, tell me a little bit more about that, because I guess I've never really ran into somebody that, was an athlete at that high of a level that admitted to going and speaking with a sports psychologist, because it does seem a little woo-woo. It's like, oh, you got to go talk to a shrink so you can perform. But I got to be honest, even just for me, like with jujitsu, like the thought of competing, and I've competed quite a bit, not nearly as much as I would have liked, just because, injuries and timing and all that. But the anxiety I get going into a tournament that is not on television, right, that nobody's following on, on the internet or something like that. It's a tremendous amount of anxiety that's created. And for me, if I had to guess, not being a psychologist, it all comes down to pride for me, because it's like, if I get beat, that means he's better than me. And I can't stand the idea of someone being better at me in anything. That's why I stopped playing golf like 12, right, 13 years ago, because just the thought of not being really good at something was it was crippling for me. But for you, I guess what kind of preceded the idea to go and do that? Was it a coach that sent you over there? Like, were you hesitant? Were you like, what take us through that whole process, I guess?
Yeah. It was getting bigger. They were pushing a lot at OU. And I was very hesitant for all the same reasons, but at the same time, like, I started getting second. And if it was going to help me win, like what when I do that's legal to go win. And if that means I got to go do an hour talking to somebody and it doesn't work, I lost an hour once a week for 20 weeks.
Right. But it paid off pretty quick.
Yeah, it paid off that year. I made the Olympic team, and it was good. It was good. I think it worked better because she knew nothing about the sport. I think had she known, it wouldn't have worked as well, because I talk with coaches and we're kind of on the same page, where I had to explain stuff, and I don't know, it kind of bubbled out, I guess.
Right.
Kind of some of the silly stuff that when I explain it to somebody, it just doesn't make sense. And,
right,
I probably could have done the same thing with a buddy with a beer. It's one of my favorite lines of, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget the name of the movie. That's a knife. This is a knife.
Right. Yeah. Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah. And she's a psychiatrist, and he's like, do they not have any mates?
Right.
Which I think is pretty spot on. Like, you got your foxhole group that should take care of everything. And in this situation, all my buddies, they all knew wrestling, and I needed to talk to somebody that didn't know wrestling. And
well, that's interesting, because I was just listening to a podcast here recently where he was talking to a guy that was doing a survey about, friendless American males and things like that, which obviously is something I've talked about a lot. That's why I did the, How to Build a Godly and Manly Foxhole series. But they talked about how modern men are going to their spouses more than they're going to friends whenever they have a major life issue, which is not in and of itself a negative thing necessarily. But as you know, and as most of you listeners know that are guys, there are just certain things that women just will never understand. And it's because of wiring, because believe it or not, breaking news, there are differences between the sexes. And that's kind of one of the things that's interesting, is you probably, or maybe could have figured it out with another buddy or a mate or something like that. But, being able to talk to that neutral third party that's not really worried about the X's and O's of what you need to do or the technicalities of finishing a double leg this way versus that way, I think it kind of removes them enough from your situation. And guess what? They're not expecting a thank you note if you make the Olympic team. Like, they're just there to talk to you. They're there to help in whatever way they can. But I can see that, and I don't know if that it was like that for you. I could see that a lot of guys would not want to do that, because that would show that they're mentally weak, right? I got to go talk to a shrink so I can perform in sports. But I guess you never really had that mindset that was kind of like a mentally weak thing to do.
Yeah. I never had that mindset. I was anxious like anybody. Like, I don't know, is this going to be a waste of time? But that was easily overrun by, if it's going to help me win, it's worth it. If it doesn't, it's an hour.
Right. So you mentioned, wanting to be an Olympian and making the Olympic team, but kind of take me through that process. Okay, you're a collegiate wrestler. And for most of the listeners, they don't really know kind of the process of, okay, how do you go from being like a high school wrestler to a collegiate wrestler to, an Olympic level wrestler, or like a, national or international level wrestler. So kind of take us through that whole process, because again, when you're in high school or whatever, it's still just a goal. Like, you're not an Olympian automatically. So kind of take us through how you kind of were put on the radar for the Olympic team and kind of what that whole process was like.
Sure. I loved it. I was real fortunate. Like I said, my dad was an Olympian, so I was right into that path. The Navy team, when we were in Florida, I lived in Pensacola, and the Navy team trained there. The Greco-Navy team, Rob Herman was the coach, and so I would go up and work out with them all the time. And I went to my first U.S. Open the summer after my senior year of high school. took 5th in the U.S. And so right away I'm on everybody's radar and got in with the club and did Greco through 2009 and then switched over to freestyle and made a freestyle Olympic team. And so I was always on the radar. And you asked earlier, I'm trying to remember what you asked, but it was different back in the day. We didn't have the internet and YouTube and Twitter and Flow Wrestling, and so people didn't know. You knew about your state, and you had that one big national tournament where you kind of get to see who the best kids are. But even then, it's hard to tell. He could be sick that day, and he was really good in high school, and so people tended to go to their favorite college. That's where you went. I went to Oklahoma. Florida didn't have a college wrestling team. Oklahoma did. I loved Oklahoma, so I went to Oklahoma. Iowa kids go to Iowa. Pennsylvania kids, Pennsylvania. And now it's not that way. Most of the guys on a team aren't from that state, and so it's changed a little bit. And the internet's helped wrestling. It's making it evolve way faster, especially at the youth level. It's crazy how good little kids are nowadays. They would kick my butt.
Well, and I look at kids now, like we have some kids at the Forge here. I talk about the Forge a lot on this podcast, so that's our jiu-jitsu.
As you should.
Right, as I should. But these are kids that from the age of 5 or 6, they are wrestling and doing jiu-jitsu. And I roll with some of these kids that are like, 14, 15, 16, like they're getting into high school. And I'm like, holy crap. If I wasn't physically stronger and better than them, this would be a problem, because it's like, I've been training jiu-jitsu for 4 years, but they've been marinating in grappling arts since they were a little kid. And as you know, like as you do a sport as a young kid, your body develops for that sport. So you'll walk up to somebody that's like a gym bro, super jacked, and they grab you by the wrist and you can easily just get your wrist away. But then a wrestler that's been grabbing wrists their entire life, or a jiu-jitsu guy that's been snatching necks their entire life, it's a different level of grip strength. Like people don't really fully understand that. So like that's crazy, because you're experiencing this now as a coach, and obviously you have a son that wrestles and you kind of been around the kind of the youth wrestling. The revolution is going to be insane. I can't imagine what we're going to be watching. Same thing with MMA. Like all these kids, like think about it, like, for Chael Sonnen and Randy Couture and, some of those more early guys, they were a thing, and then they added the other stuff. So they wrestled their whole life, and then they had to learn how to box and do everything else. Kids from a very early age are training all of it. They're doing Muay Thai and Western boxing and kickboxing and jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And so like, I guess for you, does that make you feel like a little bit like kind of a crotchety old man? Like, I want to go back to the old days where everybody went to their same state, or does that excite you about the sport?
I love it about the sport. And I'm also the crotchety old guy. Like back in my day, we were tougher.
That's right.
We
every previous generation was tougher and smarter.
I get now why they said it. You can't go on technique. New generation's going to be better, so you have to be like, we were tougher.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
We cut weight uphill both ways.
Of course. Now, kind of getting back into the Olympic stuff. So you talked about Greco and freestyle. Now, you made the Olympic team as both, correct? Like at different times?
I made the Olympic team in freestyle, and I made a world team in Greco.
Okay, so I guess for you, first of all, let's kind of back up, because I'm assuming people know all these things. So explain just kind of the fundamental differences between freestyle and Greco for our listeners, and then kind of go ahead and flow into, why did you choose freestyle this time and then move into Greco that time?
Yeah, so Greco is just upper body, no foot sweeps, no shooting on legs. It's like the traditional style from back in the day, although who knows, they maybe grab legs, but back in the day, the stance was standing straight up. So it's kind of considered Greco. And freestyle is a lot more, it's a lot closer to what we do in the U.S., folk style, collegiate style. It's a lot similar to folk style.
Okay. So then for you as you're competing, because what was the age that you were when you made your last Olympic team?
29.
29. And then as a world team competitor, you at the age of 36?
35, 36.
Okay, 35, 36. So you were competing at a high level for a very, very long time. Well, and let's maybe talk a little bit about that. But like, for you, take us through kind of what it, here, I can't exactly figure out what I would do. So we'll start here and then we'll go back to the Olympic career. Let's talk about, competing at a high level at kind of a elderly age, because at the age of 35, 36, that is like aged for a wrestler.
Yes.
But you made the world Greco team at that age, correct? Yes. So is that easier if you're older to kind of do Greco, because there's not as much shooting there? I guess there's not as much wear and tear because you're not dealing with the lower part of the body and having to fight hips and that kind of thing. But kind of take us through what it was like being a competitor that was that old.
Yeah. You're a lot wiser. You hear every coach say it, like, if I knew now back then. And
right.
So I was a lot wiser about how I went about things. The biggest thing I noticed is recovery is a lot slower. Just the injuries take longer to heal. A hard practice, it takes longer to get my body back where I can do another hard practice. So I had to be a lot more wise about my workout schedule, knowing when to stop, listening to my body, but at the same time not being like a wimp, not just taking it off because I'm a little sore. And that's hard to get somebody to tell you that, because there's not a lot of guys that go that old. So that was the struggle. The wrestling, I know how to wrestle. I got to keep getting better, but I know wrestling. So I didn't spend as much time on technique as much as I did strategy and just making sure I was in shape and healthy. That was the struggle with doing it older. The longevity, just you hit it real quick. So I listened to, I think you posted it. Maybe you're the one that turned me on to it. And they were talking about what is an expert? Is it the guy that wins Olympics once and never comes back, or the guy that makes 4 Olympic teams, never wins it, but is he a master? And I thought that was real interesting, and I liked it because it gave me a chance to be a master.
Yeah,
I've been around a long time, done this, but I think it's because my dad didn't have that same Iowa mindset. We didn't cut a lot of weight. He wasn't a big fan of cutting weight, and we're seeing that now. A lot of the best guys don't cut a whole bunch of weight anymore. It's still around. It's still prevalent, but I never cut a lot of weight, and I think that saved my body, allowed me to have that longevity, and just wrestling smart, being smarter about it.
Okay.
Being willing to take a day off if I needed it off, but also pushing myself in practice, right? If I'm going to do the practice, I'm going to be the hardest worker in there.
Right.
And allow myself to have a day off. I don't go halfway through a practice. It's either I'm the hardest worker in there or I'm taking the day off.
Right. All right. I'm going to take us on another tangent.
Yes,
we're just going to have
please.
to embrace that for tangents for this podcast. So if this is driving you nuts, you type A people, I get it. I completely understand, but we'll get back.
Blame me.
Yeah, exactly. Blame Sam. Yeah. Blame Sam. But at the same time, let's circle back to your Olympic career, but I do want to talk about the concept of weight cutting, especially for kids, because we hear a lot about weight cutting in MMA because we're seeing some of these dangerous weight cuts where people are being carried to the scale and they're passing out on the scale even. And the UFC, which is the biggest MMA organization, they haven't had anyone die from a weight cut or complications from a weight cut, but that has happened in MMA. You don't see that in boxing. Collegiately, I think there was that one summer where like 3 different collegiate wrestlers died from weight cutting or dehydration related things. And then automatically the NCAA said, nope, we're getting rid of that. And so they basically do like a hydration test and tell these athletes, here's the lowest weight class that will allow you to compete at. Is that kind of how it goes for collegiate wrestling now?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a kind of silly test because I have guys that are way overweight that'll fail a hydration. And I'll have guys that cutting a whole bunch of weight but do it right. And it says they can lose 20 more pounds and they can't. Yeah,
it's not a perfect test, but it's better. They haven't had any issues with it since then. But trying to talk through that because I've literally witnessed, dads running kids before tournaments. I mean, we're talking kids, like 9, 10-year-old kids, and having them cut weight. And these are kids whose body obviously are still developing at an extreme degree. So for you personally, what is your kind of personal approach and mindset when it comes to weight cutting for adults, but then especially for youth?
Yeah, I got again, my dad, it's what he kind of did. And I think it makes sense that whatever you lose in a normal practice. So if I lose 4 pounds in a practice, I won't do more than like 2 practices worth. So 8 pounds is the most I'm going to cut.
Okay.
Now that may mean I get my fighting weight down where I'm practicing at this weight so I can make 8 pounds, or it just may mean I don't, if the weight's 25, 33, I weigh 34, I could go 25. But if I weigh 35, I'm probably going to go 33. Okay. I'm outside of that 8 pounds. And, for a kid, it might be a pound of practice. And I think a kid cutting 2 pounds is okay. I think it teaches them, you got to be smart. Don't eat the dessert. If you're smart, you teach the kid how to do it right. He's learning some self-control, self-discipline, and it's not hurting him. Mm-hmm. Right. But beyond that, especially kids, I don't like it. As an adult, you can make up your own mind. If that's how you got to win, and I get it. I still don't like it, but I get it.
Right.
I want to make an Olympic team. The only way I can do it is cut down to this weight, and that means I don't work out. All I do is cut weight. Hey, man, not everybody makes an Olympic team, and that's your choice as an adult. But yeah, the kids, I don't like it. I'd rather see bump up, keep it fun. Wrestling's tough enough.
Right.
You don't need to add anything to wrestling to make it tough.
Well, and focus on the fundamentals, which, I have much more of a baseball background. And so, when I had someone reach out to me recently asking me about, coaching for their kid that's trying to get into baseball. And probably the best advice that I gave them, aside from just the general advice of they're not going to make the major leagues this year, they're 8, let's not put too much, pressure on them. Yeah. But the second thing is if they get asked to pitch, when I watch the Little League World Series every year, I see these kids throwing these curveballs and these sliders and putting on, and there's a lot of debate as to whether or not that actually affects the elbow and affects the shoulder. But when you see all these pitchers that were throwing junk from an early age, getting Tommy John in the major leagues, you can't say that there's no correlation. But I tell them, I'm like, look, focus on being able to throw a strike. Throw a 4-seam fastball for a strike, because you can make it to the minor leagues. You can be a professional baseball player with 2 pitches. A 4-seam fastball and a changeup. And if you know where it's going and you can, live on the outside parts of the plate and different things like that, the outside parts of the strike zone, that's going to be way better than being 10 years old trying to throw the world's best curveball. It's it doesn't make as much sense. Just throw strikes. And so I would see that kind of being a corollary for wrestling, to where it's I understand this kid might be physically bigger than you, but there were guys that were physically smaller than me in the short time that I wrestled in high school that just, rolled me up like a pretzel. And it was because they were superior at wrestling, right? Yes. They were a better wrestler. All of their angles were better. All their technique was better. And so I think that's an important thing. And I'm glad you kind of said that, but I do like what you said about, maintaining a little bit of that discipline. Hey, we're not going to get ice cream tonight because we got a tournament coming up and those types of things. And so you're keeping it in the back of their mind without, risking their health down the road.
Yeah. The only pushback I'll give is, I don't know about other sports, but wrestling, I'll take the tough kid over the technical kid any day, because you can teach technique. It's really hard to teach toughness, and you almost have to do it from, first grade through high school, because it's rare that you see a kid all of a sudden get tough in college. It can happen, but it's rare. That's a quality that's really hard to teach, and that would be my only pushback.
Right.
I'm still. I think there's other ways to be tough than just cutting weight, but
right. But how would you evaluate toughness then? So let's say there are wrestling coaches listening to this, which I'm sure there are. How do you evaluate that tough kid? Because I would tend to agree with you, because I was never the best athlete on the team. I was the most grinder of an athlete. I was the guy that worked the hardest at practice. And so how do you evaluate that in a healthy way as a coach?
It's really, really hard. Okay. And I think the easiest way is seeing them in practice. That's where you can tell a lot more. Tournaments, it's more, you're seeing not necessarily the toughness as you are who's got that ability to close out, to find a way to win. Mm-hmm. You'll see a little bit of toughness. They just stay in a match and grind. But practice is where you can really see it, which it's getting harder for college coaches to go to a practice and watch. They're making more and more rules and making it tougher. And it's more, at least in wrestling, we have to lean on the youth coaches, the high school coaches. Is the kid tough? And most coaches know to tell the truth. If I lie to this college coach, he's not going to listen to me again, Yeah. And so they'll usually shoot you pretty straight, Okay. And so that's what I'm finding. That's how I have to do it. And I'm still young to coaching. I'm still new to coaching.
Cool. And we'll get more into kind of your coaching and your philosophy that you're developing and all that. But I do want to get back before I segue to another thing about your Olympic career. So take me through the process, because I'm assuming the overwhelming majority of the people listening to this, yours truly included, have never been an Olympian, right? So we've never had that satisfaction of making an Olympic team, wearing the rings, wearing the flag, and representing the country in any type of a formal professional way. So take us through kind of the story of you actually making your first Olympic team, and kind of that whole process of leading up to becoming an Olympian, going to the Olympics, kind of that whole thing. Just fire away.
Sure. So I tried out for my first Olympic team in 2004. And in wrestling, only number 1 guy goes. No, nobody else. Number 2 guy, if 1 gets hurt, 2 gets to go, but 2 doesn't go to the Olympics. They don't get to wrestle. So that makes it tough, only 1 guy. It's a lot of sports, top 2 can go. some sports top 3 and so on, but only number 1. So 04 was my first Olympic trials, and I lost in the semis to Dennis Hall, who was an Olympian upperweight world champ. He dropped down, and I lost 4-2 or 3-2, and he was way bigger. I was still small then. I wasn't ready for the weight yet, but that match I lost, and I still consider it one of my best matches ever. That was when I knew I'm there. This guy was a world champ upperweight, and I only lost 4-2. Like, I can do this. But anyway, took third there. And then tried again in 08. So that's my second Olympic trials. Made to the finals. Lost. So I was alternate for 2008 Olympics in Beijing. And then we get to 2012. This is my third Olympic trials now. So that's a lot of years into it. And make to the finals. And I'm against Nick Simmons, who beat me the year before for the world team. We did a best of 3 matches. I won the first. He won the second and third match. He goes Olympic team or world team. So now Olympic year, he wins the first match. He's only got to win one more, and this time I win the next 2 matches and I make the Olympic team. And it was awesome. Yeah, you can't put it in words, like all that. I'm going to make you put it in words.
Yeah, I mean, hard. Put it into words. Like, from an early age, you wanted to be an Olympian, and then you were down a match, and I mean, to wrestle back and win those last 2. I mean, to become an Olympian, like, do it. Like, give me the words.
It's that's why it's hard. I'm going to mumble around every time I talk about it. There's a lot of ums and
yeah.
So it was fun though. Lost the first match, won the second, was winning the third. I had the only takedown, but back then they did a, you had the coin flip, and they did a ball grab, which was one really weird thing wrestling did. In the stands, people were like, blue ball, come on, pick the blue ball.
Okay.
Reach in the sack and get the blue ball. It was really weird, but sure enough, they grabbed the blue ball. So I get to start with the leg. The overtime was one guy starts with like a single leg or a high crotch or whatever shot. You got 30 seconds, you finish, you win. If you don't, the other guy wins. And 90% of the time, the guy that gets the leg wins. So I get to start with the leg. I'm running him toward the edge, and you can watch it on video. Like, I just slip, like, just sweat spot something and lands flat on my belly. And that's where that toughness came in. And I ran my feet and somehow finished with, I don't know, half second left. And so I make the Olympic team. And yeah, a lot of energy bubbled out. I went from extremely tired to jumping all over the place, and I'm not an emotional guy. I was actually talking about this with Nate Tomsello, one of our wrestlers, who was third for the Olympic team this year. Just how, like, in college, I never really got excited. Third, like, I felt like I should have won. I win the U.S. Open. That's what you're supposed to do. Act like you've been there before.
Right.
How I on the one hand, I think you got to have that mindset to a degree. The guys that aim for a national title become All-Americans. The guys that want to be an All-American, if they fall short, they don't. Yeah. So that was one of the few times I had a lot of emotion, and I think I wish I would have taken in other wins more. If it's not really a regret, but I wish I would have. That's one where, like, I'd finally reached the goal. That was a big goal for me, and something I've been wanting to do my whole life. And my dad was there, and it was 40 years since he made his Olympic team, and so it was a really cool moment. We're the only father-son in USA wrestling to be Olympians, and I guess that makes my mom the only mom-wife.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun, and I made the team, and then you enjoy that night, and then it's back to work. Now, it took me 12 years of trying, like, specifically to make an Olympic team. I'd been doing it my whole life, but 12 years to make the team. Now I got one shot at the Olympics, right? I got to go, and instead of just the best guys in the country, it's
right.
the best guys in the world.
And how old are you at this point? You're late 20s?
28, 29.
Okay.
Something like that. And
so how long of a gap is there between the Olympic trials and the Olympics at that point?
So for wrestling, it's not very long because injuries is a real deal. Some sports know a year out. We know like 3 months out. That night you're buying flights, you're trying to get a flight, you're trying to get hotels because most of them are already taken for the Olympics, So, we find out about 3 months out. We do a couple world team or Olympic team camps, and then we head over to the Olympics. So it was one day of fun, enjoy it, or one night really, and back to training.
Right.
Got to get ready for the world now.
Okay. So that was 2012. And so that's London. London Olympics. And so, okay, so tell us about the process, because obviously I'm assuming the training was hard and difficult. Well, I was going to kind of skip over that. One quick thing before we go into, I want to hear about your Olympic experience, flying over there, opening ceremonies and all that. But what is the difference between training to wrestle guys that you might be, training with all the time versus how you're preparing to wrestle someone from Iran or Cuba or somewhere else?
So when I first started, I'm training for the world, and if I train for the world, I beat the Americans.
Right.
Like we were just saying earlier, and it didn't work out too well.
Okay.
So when I made the Olympic team, I trained for the Olympic guys. I studied up on them. I made sure I had my game plans, everything ready, and make the Olympic team. And now I switch over to the world level guys. And a lot of them I've wrestled, because you travel all over the world wrestling, getting the experience. So I know a lot of them, but I'm making sure I know everybody, because within a couple weeks of us making our Olympic team, everybody that's going to be on the Olympic teams for each country. So you can go watch film and get ready for them. But what I learned, especially in that Olympics, maybe just before it, but after that for sure, was I got to worry about me. Like I got to train my stuff. Like if I'm worried about them, I'm wrestling their match. Whoever controls the ties controls the match. And if I should know I'm wrestling Jordan Burroughs. I should know he has a good double.
Right.
If I don't go into it knowing that, I'm in trouble. But if I go in that match, like if he shoots double, I'm going to do this. If, I'm going to make sure I stay low, and I'm going to make sure I stay away from this. And I'm already wrestling his match. Like he's wrestled people that have done that. He's wrestled guys that won't let him shoot a double. He has an answer. And so I have to be able to wrestle my match while being aware of whatever it is he's best at.
Okay.
And the guys that are best, the Jordan Burroughs, the guys that beat everybody in the world, force them to wrestle his style. He's getting his double leg.
Mm-hmm.
They're not stopping it, and that's really the trick to be that highest. You force people to do what you want them to do.
Okay. Very good. So you're an Olympian. You're flying over to London.
Yeah, we had to go on a private jet. We were one of the only teams that did that. Our team leader paid for us to have a private jet. Shout out to Novogratz. He's out in New York doing Bitcoin stuff. And
okay.
Yeah. He was good. He was a good team leader though. He took care of us. And so we get to fly over private jet, which was awesome. But at the same time, it's we're wrestlers. We're not, we're not,
you don't need
pro athletes and we're cutting weight. And he's got this fancy jet and they got all this food out there, like sitting out, and we're all just like, this is terrible. Like, just give us each 20,000, because whatever it costs, 100,000 to send us over. We'll just take a normal flight. Like that's what we're used to. But it was an experience, at the time we would love to have that money, but it was an experience. I got to fly over first class, a 13-hour flight's all of a sudden 11 hours and it's done like that, So that was a lot of fun, but we're the only team that got to do that. We get there, they tell us we're not going to do the opening ceremonies. We got to go train and cut weight. And all the guys on the team are like, no, we're going we trained our whole life for this. And, the guy that's made is like on his third team is like, well, we don't have to go, And like, no, we're going.
Yeah, we're going, man.
Come on. So we get to do that. We stay at the Olympic Village, which is surreal. That's awesome. You feel like you're one of the gods, like a Greek god. It's Olympic Village, Everybody's young, athletic, good looking, and then you got like servants walking around like, it's going to rain today. Here's an umbrella with Olympic rings. Here you go.
Right.
Like, wow, thanks. I'll take 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of surreal. Although what was crazy, so they had the Olympic court, like the food court, and you have each country. So this is what Africa eats, this is what Asia eats, and so you can try whatever food. And then over in the corner, you got a McDonald's because they're a big sponsor,
Right.
And every day the line for McDonald's was so long. And I'm like scratching my head like, this is the Olympics.
Right.
Don't we
you can get anything. Yeah.
How do you guys do this? Like, we got to compete. Hey, go ahead and grab me an Egg McMuffin.
Right. Exactly.
So that was odd to me, but we get to do the opening ceremonies, and we're United States, so we're like the last team in there. So it's 4 hours walking down this path toward the stadium, and you're hearing the crowd just crazy. And you're pumped, and then you're kind of like, oh, it's taking forever. And like, there's no way they're going to be cheering by the time we get in there. 4 hours my voice is done. Nobody likes America anyway.
Right.
We went in, and that was up there like top 5 experiences of my life. Walking in that stadium, and everybody's cheering so loud, and that was very surreal and awesome. And we're trying to video, and you're trying to take it in, but you're trying to video it so you have it on video. And it was surreal. I feel bad for the Olympians this year that don't get to enjoy that the same way.
Yeah, the opening ceremony was weird. Empty stadium, and the Japanese tried to do everything
I'm
they could.
glad they did it. Like, I'd rather have the Olympics than not. And I'm glad they let some people in there. You know, that one section had people, but I feel for them because that was, might have been the best experience of the Olympics.
Right.
Was walking in there. It was awesome.
Well, and a lot of times the commentators during the opening ceremonies, they point this out, which is exactly true. A lot of these people, that is their Olympic moment, is the opening ceremony, because we spend a lot of time focusing on the gold medalists and, Michael Phelps with 8 gold medals and, oh, look at Usain Bolt. And we focus on those people, but there's a lot of people on the U.S. team and the Jamaican team and every other team that's it. And you have these super, super tiny countries that have 4 or 1 Olympian. And it's that's their moment. That's the last time we're going to hear that person's name. So you got to experience that. You got to go through and kind of see all that. But now kind of take me through the mindset shift of, okay, that's done. Video's been recorded. You've worn your Ralph Lauren Polo USA stuff. You got all your stuff. You're swagged out. But now it's time to get down to business. So take me through kind of the training time. How long was it after the that opening ceremony before you had your match, and kind of take us through what the competition was like for you?
Yeah, it was. So we get done the next morning. We flew out to Serbia, out in the middle of nowhere in Serbia to train, which is good. It's easier to get your mind right. Being at the Olympic Village, we're wrestlers. We could do it. We face adversity. We're cutting weight. It wouldn't have been terribly difficult, but it would have been harder. You want to go see the sights. You want to go do the stuff. So we went to Serbia. It was us, India, I think maybe Germany, maybe one other team. So there's 4 teams that are training and just trying to get away. And you're really, at that point, energy's not an issue. You're not worried about being out of shape. You're in great shape, and the amount of energy that you have just for being in the experience is enough, So it's more sharpening your skills, getting your weight just right where you need it so you feel the best and without feeling small or, being waterlogged. And so it's very, you're just dialing in there. And it was quick, it's hard to remember what all that was like. It was monotonous. It was same stuff every day, just focusing in. And normally that'd be rough. It wasn't rough at all. You're getting ready for what you've been training your whole life for. So then we fly back, and we get there maybe 2 days before. And wrestling's the last 3 days of the Olympics, or at least it was in 12. Mm-hmm. And I wrestled the second to last day. So the bummer thing was we didn't get to enjoy the Olympic Village. We never really – we were there that first day, enjoyed it. Didn't get to enjoy it the rest of the time, which I'm all right with. Okay. Like an Olympic team. I'm all right with that. Yeah. So we show up the day before, and now you're in your last day of weight cut. So you're pretty much in your room or in the sauna, and then we go wrestle, make weight and wrestle. And that was intense. It was kind of a bummer because in the U.S., you get to wrestle on the backside of a bracket, come back and get third. For international, you only get to wrestle for third if the guy you lose to goes to the finals. So, I lost first round to a guy, and he lost in the semis to the eventual champ, and so he gets to go for third. I don't. 2 months later, he bumped up a weight and beat our guy that won bronze in the Olympics. I'm just like, man, I was right there, but I wasn't. Right. I needed to win it. The other thing was that ball grab. So a normal wrestling match, 6-7 minutes. It was back then, it was 3 2-minute periods, and you just got to win 2 of the 3 periods. So I was done in 4 minutes. He won the first period. Second period, he played all defense because the ball grab, you got a 50-50. Mm-hmm. And then you play defense again the next period, and you have a better chance at it being your ball. So you're going to win. And he played defense. He won the ball grab. That was it. It was over. So that was a bummer. It was over quick. 4 minutes like that, the dream's done. You're hoping that guy does good, and you're kind of – you don't want him to do good because he doesn't want to beat you. But you want him to do good, so you get pulled in. And but I was the same day as Jordan Burroughs, and he won the Olympic gold. And so it was still fun. It was a great experience. But to what you were saying, there's 300 events. So if you want to call it 300 gold medals, and I know some are teams. Yeah, sure. But let's call it 300 gold medals. There's 10,000 athletes. and most of them are going home without a medal. And even the ones you win silver, like you enjoy that later. Like at the moment you were so close to what you wanted. Like you're not.
It's always weird that the bronze medalist seems way more excited than the silver.
Yes.
Like and almost across the board.
Yeah, you get to finish with a win.
Right.
Like, the other guy's finishing on a loss.
Right.
That's rough. That's why in wrestling we have, and probably other sports, we have a true second sometimes, where if the third and second didn't meet, they get to wrestle for the true second. And that's like the toughest match in wrestling. I should have won, and now I got to go. And like, what does it matter? Second, third, what does it matter? That's a rough match, and I flip flop on that.
Right.
Sometimes I like it because it's very wrestling. It's very like face adversity, and I've been on the other end of it too, and like that's the last thing you want to do is go wrestle.
Right. Well, let me actually, before we move on and talk about this year's, Olympic wrestling and kind of all the stuff that goes along with that, you trained your entire life. You trained literally decades to become an Olympian, and your actual physical athletic Olympic moment didn't last very long.
No.
So you said it was a bummer. You said that multiple times, but I do want to press you a little bit more.
Sure.
To a guy like me, right, who's never competed at that level in anything, that seems crazy. Like, because you have to sacrifice so much time with friends, so many Doritos, so many things to get to that moment. And then it didn't work out the way that you wanted to. But now you're several years past that, right? Like it's been a long time since then, almost a decade since then. How have you kind of internalized what happened there? Like, talk to me a little bit more about that realization that was it. That was probably my one shot.
Yeah, it hadn't bothered me much. Like NCAAs bothers me way more. I felt like I should have won NCAAs. Olympics I knew was going to be tough, and he wins the ball grab. I win the ball grab. I think I win the match. I had him tired. Like I had him exhausted, and I felt like I was in a good spot to win it. And so I don't know. It bothers me in that, man, I think I could have went and won it. Like I think I could. Like I said, I'm confident. I feel like I could beat everybody in the world that year. I'd wrestled most of them. I was like 50-50 with them. But at the same time, that's part of the sport, man. It's part of the Olympic experience, and competing at that level, like it's a ball grab, it's a bad call, it's the guy that woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It's all the more impressive. Those guys that repeat at the Olympics and go years being undefeated is incredible. Their mastery of the sport is unreal, because I like to think I'm one of the best in the world. I could beat anybody on the right day. Mm-hmm. And those guys to do it continually is unreal. Which, speaking of that, Krellin, lost to, oh my goodness, Roland Gardner going for his fourth, and there's a Cuban going for his fourth.
Right. And he's the heavy favorite to win his fourth.
Yeah. I can't imagine. The only way he loses is if somebody buys him out for a ridiculous amount of money.
Certainly possible, but I would assume that he's probably going to leave with another gold.
Man, they don't make much money there. And with everything going on in Cuba, I would imagine there's a price that he would take. I don't think he will either, but there is certainly a price he would take. Right.
Well, before we get off the Olympic subject and kind of move in, well, we're going to stay on the Olympic subject, but before we get off your Olympic experience, I want to know just a couple of quick questions. So first one is, what are the best and worst things about being an Olympian?
The worst, you miss out on a lot of stuff. I never went skiing. I never did snowball. I skipped all that. I knew it was kind of unsafe for the knees and just not smart, and I'll do it when I'm done.
Right.
So you miss stuff like that. I actually listened to a radio host the other day. He was like, that kid is 19. He won the Olympics. He said it was like his lifelong dream came true. He's like, he's 19.
What life?
Yeah. It was funny in 2 degrees, right? But, and yeah, you give up on a lot of stuff that other kids are going and doing. You're doing the practices. Like those girls in gymnastics, they're 7-hour days, 8-hour days every day. Crazy what they go through. And wrestling, it's crazy too, but it's so hard of a sport. If you do a 4-hour day, man, that's a lot of wrestling. Yeah, you're like 2 practices, 4 hours. You're probably only doing 1 the next day. That's a long day. So we don't have the same time. We have more body issues, and it is still time consuming. But like my brother was trained for an Ironman, put way more hours in than I did.
Yeah,
way more hours. He had 5 a.m.s all the time. I'd be like, well, I'm going to sleep till 7.
Yeah, no kidding.
We got practice at 8.
You enjoy that, man.
Yeah. So I don't even remember the question.
Well, it was just like, what's the best and worst things about being an Olympian? So that's the worst.
That's the worst. Yeah. The best is, you accomplished your dream. It was something big that not very many people do. And I take a lot of pride in that, that I accomplished it. And I feel like my dad's system that he set up, that he made an Olympic team, it works. Because there's a lot of guys that they have their system and their kids don't make it. And that may not be the reason why.
Right.
It's just hard to make an Olympic team. But I felt like that proved there's something to the system that we use, and just a lot of pride in that, a lot of pride in the family name. And in wrestling, I do camps now, and kids have no idea who I am. I'll go do a camp, they have no clue. They don't. He's an Olympian? Who?
Yeah.
Hazewinkel, is that fake
Dumb
name?
Kids. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of that in wrestling. People don't know who you are. Jordan Burroughs, people know who he is. There's about 3 or 4 guys in U.S. wrestling that are common names. People know. That's it. And I can't name guys on Olympic teams from 2 Olympics ago.
Yeah,
3 Olympics
it's hard.
ago. Yeah, it's just kind of the part of the sport, and I'm all right with that. I wouldn't change it for anything.
All right.
Maybe golf.
Yeah, maybe golf.
If I'd
we
win
don't like
4
talking
U.S.
about golf.
Opens in golf, I'd be doing all right.
Maybe a little bit different.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, exactly. What a loser. All right. What is the biggest misconception about being an Olympian?
I have no idea. I'd have to think about that. I don't know if I've ever thought about that before. I know it when I hear it. I'm like, that's not true at all. I'll tell you one. Everybody thinks it's an orgy over there.
Right, Olympic Village. That was the first thing when you mentioned the Olympic Village. I was like, oh yeah, that's just like STD factory, essentially,
that's
right?
what everybody says. That's what they think. I didn't see it, which I'm not in those circles.
You also said you weren't there for very long.
I wasn't there for
so
very long.
You missed out on all the
So it
orgies.
could have happened, but I will say, I mentioned earlier, the umbrella had the Olympic rings. So everything they give you has Olympic rings on it, and we hear, hey, down at the medical, they got condoms and they got the Olympic rings. And
is that for real?
And so they're like, Sam, go get him. You're married. Like, you go get him. I'm like, done. This is like the best Dirty Santa gift ever. Like, I don't want a condom. Oh, cool. It's got Olympic rings. All right. That's actually a cool gift. So I go down and I'm like, hey, there's the bowl with all the condoms. So I take the whole bowl, and I get back to the room. I dump it on the bed. All the wrestlers flood in, and man, they're just Trojans. Like,
oh, come on. No rings.
So they all leave, and I got this pile of condoms on my bed, and it hit me. That's how those rumors start. Like the lady down at things, like those wrestlers, they're dirty. The cleaning ladies are like, oh my goodness, it's an orgy for sure. There's an orgy going on. Look at all these condoms on his bed. So that backfired a little bit.
All right, well, that's a pretty good misconception. So that'll give us a good segue into the 2021 Olympics. So obviously, if you're listening to this on time, the Olympic wrestling matches, they start today. That's when the competition starts. So for my money, and like you follow this a lot closer than I do, I feel like for the United States, and we'll just focus on freestyle, the best chances for gold medals from the outside really looking in are Kyle Dake, Kyle Snyder, and Gable Steveson. Okay. Yes. That's my money. And I don't have their weights right here on top of my head, because when you go from collegiate to this to that, and then you lose all the weights, I forget. And I don't do kilograms. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to convert things? I'm an American. All right. We do things our way. We don't do the metric system. We don't do any of that nonsense. So from your perspective, do you agree with my assessment that Dake, Snyder, and Steveson are the kind of the favorites to win gold medals? And did I leave anybody out in freestyle?
David Taylor has real good chances.
Okay. That's right. That's right. Yeah. That is an oversight by me. Sorry to David Taylor and the entire Ohio State family for doing that. That's my bad. And so I guess from your perspective, if you had to actually give a prediction though, right? Because we're hopeful that all 4 of those guys win a gold medal. Which ones do you think actually will?
Oh, Kyle Dake's going to be probably the most fun to watch. The top 3 guys there could all beat each other. It is going to be really interesting. Kyle's 2-time champ last 2 years, up a weight. And then you have the guy at 74 that has beaten Burroughs a couple times now. He's the 2-time champ last 2 years at 74, which is the Olympic weight. And then you have Chamizo, who is maybe the best athlete right now in wrestling. And if you count him out, you're an idiot. So those 3 are going to be excited. And I think the one that ends up by himself, 2 of them have to be on the side. The guy that ends up by himself, I think, probably wins. It's going to be really close. I'm pulling for Kyle Dake. David Taylor probably has the best chance at winning. He has one other really hard guy at his weight, Y'Den, who's considered maybe the best in the world on paper, but Taylor's beat him twice soundly both times. Taylor's coming off an injury, so that could hurt him, but he's 47-0 the last couple of years. international experience, and
he beat the brakes off
16,
Bo Nickel in the. I was shocked by that. I mean, I guess I shouldn't have been, but like he beat Bo Nickel pretty easily.
Yeah, he's got Big Brother on him. They train together, and Bo's got some learning to do. He's getting better, but he's not there yet. David definitely is. Kyle Snyder, it's going to be round 3. That's going to be exciting to watch. Him and, man, I always say this dude's name wrong.
Yeah, the Russian dude.
Yeah, Sadulayev.
Yeah,
they're 1-1, I think. This will be the 3rd round. They both won the Olympics in 16, 2 different weights. And it's going to be, that'll be a really good match. And there's a wild horse there. I can't even say his name. The Iranian. He medaled back in 14, failed for drugs. Missed 4 or 5 years, and now he's back. He's got a win over Snyder, and I would imagine he was using steroids the whole time. Just cycled off. I don't think he's back. Yeah, that opens a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
There's a lot to talk about with Russia. The Olympic Committee, Russia Olympic. It sounds better.
Right.
And on that, so part of the Olympic experience, 2012, we won as Olympic team, USA men's wrestling. At the time, we didn't. Russia won. We took 2nd. 3 years later, part of the reason that Russia's not officially in right now, 2 of the Russians failed to the drug test. You take them out, we win the Olympic. We're the Olympic team champs. I'm an Olympic champ.
Right. There you go.
Never got to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't get any of that. So that's interesting, but I'm getting off topic. I'm going down.
Well, no, that's ripe with everything, because calling it the Russian Olympic Committee is just ridiculous. And it's just, and I forget who was talking about it. They were talking about these peptides and these different things that you can use, and these things that leave your system so quickly. And to think that,
cycle.
Yeah, to think that these countries aren't doing that. And I'm a little bit jaded and cynical about it. To think that the US isn't doing that in some certain shape or form, I think is a little bit crazy, but it's just
well, we are.
Yeah. And it's just,
to be fair, we are, Armstrong,
Lance Armstrong.
Yep, he got caught. I will say our kind of joke in wrestling is the U.S. we're learning how to catch the drugs. This is how you test for it. This is what they're using. In Russia, they're learning how to do the drugs. They're figuring out how to cheat, where we're figuring out how to catch the cheaters. And and I'm torn on it, because if I'm training for the Olympics my whole life, and the quad before me, those guys all cheat, and now I don't get to be in the Olympics, would make me mad. Mm-hmm. However, Russia, it's blatant there, and it's from top down, so there needs to be a punishment. And I don't know the right answer, but there needs to be a punishment. And this is, I don't.
Well, because people are like, oh, you can't punish the athletes, but it's the athletes had a choice whether or not they would do these things. They could have just not been an Olympic athlete, which I've never been in that position to make that, moral stand. No, I'm not going to put that in my body because it's the wrong thing to do.
Right.
And this is their entire life as well. And whenever somebody that works for Vladimir Putin comes in and says, all right, we're going to put you in this black hood, or we're going to take you over here, we're going to inject you with something that's going to make you Superman. That's kind of a hard spot to be in. Sure. One thing before we move on, we talked about Dake, Snyder, and Taylor. Let's talk about Gable Steveson, because, he's somebody that's kind of really broken out for a lot of people. And there's already rumors about what he's going to do after the Olympics. But how do you look at his chances of winning? Because he's at heavyweight, right?
I think he wins. I think he wins in style. I will say that there's 2 really tough guys there that have won the last 6 World Olympics. There's really nobody else at the weight. Those 2, one won the last 3 and one won 3 before that. But Gable he crushed our number 1 guy, who was the bronze the last 2 years, and just
ran right through him.
If he shows up with his level of confidence, it's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be ridiculous.
So could he be the breakout star for in a way for Team USA, at least for Team USA Wrestling?
Yes, absolutely. He'll be like Snyder was. He's Captain America now, Snyder. And when he won it at whatever it was, 18 or 19, won the Olympic, became a huge star immediately. Gable will be the same way. Although I think he's pretty set on going to WWE. They're already pushing him hard, and he'll fit right in. He's got the personality.
An entertainer.
Yeah. I would like to see him do football, but I get it.
Yeah. He could build a great career. Look at Brock Lesnar. He's one of the biggest, WWE wrestlers of all time. And, it's just, this was a guy who was a national champion.
Yeah, Jack Swagger, a little shout out to us, our Okie. He was on heavyweight when I was at OU.
Right. And he's still fighting Bellator. Yep. Right. And so there's, he could have a chance to do some of those things. Because you look at a guy like DC, one of the greatest MMA wrestlers ever, one of the greatest MMA fighters ever, and MMA wrestlers, I guess. I mean, before he lost to Stipe the second time, I had him on my Mount Rushmore for MMA just because of the guys he had beaten. It's like, there's not a whole lot of shame in losing to John Jones, right? I mean, that's because that guy may be the most dangerous human being to ever walk the face of the planet. But I mean, he started his MMA career at like 30.
Yeah.
And so if you're Gable, I mean, you can go make a crap ton of money. And if you want to go do the real thing for a while, Brock Lesnar did that. Yeah. He kind of popped back and forth. And, he got a lot of assistance physically, with some syringes while he was over in WWE, which he'll never admit to.
He knows a guy.
Yeah, he knows a guy. Oh, all of a sudden he rubs his cream on his butt and all of a sudden he's enormous. But that's kind of a cool thing.
B12s.
B12s, exactly.
We were told we walked in on Cuba one time and they were getting shots in the butt and the lady everybody looked like a deer in headlights and the lady's like, B12.
Yeah, B12, I'm sure. Exactly. So yeah, I'm excited to watch him wrestle and kind of see what he has to do. I do want to talk about, because you mentioned it earlier in the show, this 1 rep per country per weight, and in international competition, the limited weight classes. Okay, so do you know why there's only 1 rep per country per weight? And do you know why the weight classes are so limited?
So what I've been told, it's medals and time. That's part of it, just by the Olympic Committee down.
Right.
But wrestling has the most medals of any sport. Like most countries get a medal. And so I think that's a big part of it. If you make it where only 2 or 3 each country, it's going to be Russia and USA and Iran, and they're going to win all the medals and nobody else will. It's also part of the reason we have 2 bronze in wrestling, which I think is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I would rather have another weight class. If you take out all the extra bronze, you add another 2 weight classes. I would rather see that happen because we have 10, I think, in world years. We drop it down to 6 for Olympics. And so you have all these guys meshing and it adds some fun, but I'd rather see more weight classes. But that's still how I understand it. That's part of the reason we should never have been taken out of Olympics, but that was part of the reason we got in. And there was a lot of craziness that day. A bunch of the world team, like the people that vote at the Olympics on what gets cut, weren't there that year. And like I said, wrestling's a lot of countries. It's the only sport they have a chance to medal in. It's wrestling. Right. So it was crazy. It got cut.
Yeah. That's not even worth talking about. It's such a stupid thing to really go into, but the limited weights and the limited reps per country, that leaves out Olympic gold medal champions like Jordan Burroughs. Yeah. So obviously Kyle Dake, that was the big news for me from the Olympic trials, U.S. Olympic trials for wrestling, was that Kyle Dake finally got over the hump, because Kyle Dake was always a little bit big for that class. The weight cut was hard. And I don't know if it was just a mental thing that he couldn't really get through Jordan Burroughs, and like he had, it took him so long to make his Olympic team because he had that guy, one of the greatest of all time, in his way.
We talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
How do you know if you have this guy behind you?
Well, and so that's the thing but it's crazy to me that Jordan Burroughs is watching the Olympics right now, because now, for all intents and purposes, Kyle Dake, if you just look at the scores, it doesn't look that way. But if you believe your eyes, Kyle Dake dominated those two matches against Jordan Burroughs.
Absolutely.
And it was like Jordan was either really gun shy. Yeah, timid is probably the perfect word. Like I was like, what am I watching? And I'm like, okay, this is an Olympian. This is a gold medalist. When he lost the first match, I was like, he knows something that I don't. He sees something in Kyle that I don't. Maybe he knows that Kyle gets tired. Maybe he saved himself and said, if I lose the first one, no big deal. I'm definitely going to win the second 2. But the second match went just like the first one. I didn't see that urgency, that sense of urgency from him. Like, oh, I got to shoot. I got to do something. But what was interesting is in the final 20, 25 seconds of both of those matches, he turned it on. It's like, there he is. There's Jordan Burroughs, and you could see Kyle Dake was, kind of going into extreme defense mode while still trying to,
Well, and what's crazy, the first match, that last 20, he had a chance. So Kyle's really good, body lock when you shoot, and Jordan's a shooter, and Jordan's always won the battle. Kyle will throw him, but he'll get more takedowns than Kyle gets throws off it, and he looked timid about it. He looked worried about it. He shot in once early in the match. Kyle kind of tossed him. Kyle scored. So 20 seconds left, Jordan shoots in again, and who am I to correct Jordan Burroughs? But, But I was watching this, I couldn't believe it. So he could have ran his feet and seen if he can get the takedown, but instead, he's going to lose anyway, right? He gets thrown, who cares? He's already losing. but he goes down to like that defensive mode and tries to scramble down the ground, which is what he did earlier. And Kyle scores again. And then he comes in the second match still timid. And it really surprised me that he didn't go all out on that shot to see if he could finish again. When my thought, if I'm timid and I'm worried about my best move and I'm already losing short time left, I'm going to hit it and see if I can hit it.
Right.
I don't want to go into the second match the same mindset. And yeah, something was off for sure. I thought J'Den would win. I thought he had Big Brother on him, but I knew it'd be a match. I didn't think it'd be like that. Kyle blew him out.
Yeah, I mean, great for Kyle Dake, and his performance was amazing.
And that dude looks good.
Yeah, so we'll see how that works out for him. But the other thing that we thought was going to happen was that with U.S. trials, it was like, okay, it's either going to be Jayden Cox or it's going to be Kyle Snyder, right? And because when you look at it legitimately, Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Dake, Kyle Snyder, and Jayden Cox all had opportunities to win Olympic gold medals if there were that many weights available, right?
Yes.
But we never got that match between Kyle Snyder and Jayden Cox because supposedly, apparently, I don't know, Jayden Cox didn't make weight. So I'll give you what I remember from the story, but you tell me because you were there on the ground that day, like there. You know what was happening. But this was what I got from Twitter and everything. So Jayden Cox was ready to make weight. He was kind of making his way to his weight, but he said that a representative of USA Wrestling, who just so happened to be his coach, told him the wrong time for weigh-in, right? Yep. And then when the time came for him to weigh in, he wasn't ready to weigh in. He wasn't at his weight. And then, boom, just like that, he's got to leave the trials. He can't compete in the trials. And, afterwards he's saying he's going to, there's going to be some legal things that he's going to try to go through. And all I'm sitting here thinking is like, okay, so even if he goes to the courts and a judge agrees with him that there was this egregious error, what are they going to do? Bring Kyle Snyder out and say, all right, well, let's just get you two guys weeks later, months later, like to deal with this and figure out how it's going to be. It's like, I don't think there's a scenario where you make the Olympic team, Jay.
That's exactly what they do. It happened. It's happened before. It happened to one of the Smith brothers, I think.
Really? Yeah, okay. It's a crazy story. Yeah. So I guess
it shouldn't happen.
It shouldn't have happened, but take me through what you experienced and what you heard on the ground because you were there during the trials.
Yeah. So I'm there with Nate Tomasello and we're getting ready and weigh-ins are 7:30 to 8. And so Nate goes back at 7:30. Nate, and you got all the guys down there. They're all sitting around waiting for weigh-ins or still cutting weight. Nate's one of those. He had to cut right up to 7:30, maybe 7:40. So actually, I think it was 7:40. So Nate heads back and the mat we were having him run on and lose his weight, J'Den Cox is running on, and J'Den's not cutting weight. Right? It's not a weight cut for him. He's the one like he's not going down a weight. He's going up, right. So it's not an issue.
That was the other thing that was really weird.
Yeah, it's not an issue. So I'm like, he's jogging. He's not worried. He's going to wait till everybody's done. That's nice of him. They can go get their drinks. He's not still in their spot in line. I'm like, what a nice guy. Then it's 7:45. Then it's 7:50. And so I walk over to KJ and I'm like, hey, weigh-ins are done in 10 minutes, and he's like, no, weigh-ins are 8 to 8:30. I was like, no, look, like guys drinking water.
Yeah.
Like, you don't do that before weigh-ins. Nope. And he was like, no, it goes till 8:30. It's like, maybe he knows something I don't because he is one of the USA Wrestling coaches. So I'm like, okay. I walk back there to see what's taking Nate so long. Maybe his weight's not on yet. Maybe he's running around, just see if he needs anything. And so I come and walking back to the weighing area and they're like, Sam, do you know where J'Den is? You know where J'Den is? I'm like, yeah, he's over there jogging. They're like, well, he's got 5 minutes. All right. So I go running back and I'm like, hey, man, they need him now. They're calling for him over there. And coach kind of looks at me like, kind of looks at his watch. He's like, no. I'm like, huh, well, I've told him twice now.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. So I like, what am I going to tell him? So I walk over and sit down and out comes Tomasello. Now there's 3 minutes left. And Tomasello's like, J'Den, man, you got to go weigh in right now. They're like, you got 2 minutes. They're yelling for you. And you start hearing people in the back like, where's J'Den? And then KJ's like, J'Den, we got to go. And they sprint off and he gets there on time. Maybe 2 minutes left or something. weight wasn't an issue, but with his stuff on, he's over, right? So he's got to strip down, and strips down, makes weight. It's after time. And so then they were fighting it, and I don't see where they thought they could win. I don't see in what way they thought they could. You got to set time, and it's terrible because
he was on such a roll coming into the trials.
Coming into COVID, I thought he was the best in the U.S. right then. He hadn't been taken down in 2 years. He was on top of his game. I had him beating Sadulayev, who unbelievably good, 5-time champ. Right. Like that guy is really good. Him and Snyder back and forth. I had J'Den winning everything. I thought I beat Snyder. He beats Sadulayev. Crushes everybody. Now, I will say he didn't look great coming through COVID. They did a little preemptive flow wrestling, did a thing, and he didn't look as good. So then I was like, well, it's curious to see who's going to win, Snyder or Cox. I don't know. But that should never happen. Both, I always knew when weigh-ins were. You're cutting weight. Like, that's the one thing you know is, like, I can't wait for 7:30. Like,
right.
I'm going to be on the other hand, like, not cutting weight. You got your coach saying, yeah, it's at 8. Okay, it's at 8. Like, I could see myself also being like, coach said it. He's on it. What's really weird to me, though, is that neither one of them were aware enough to see. Like, there was a bunch of people on the mat cutting weight. Now they're all gone. Now you see people drinking water because it starts 7:30. There's guys that are out of there at 7:31 in 12 seconds chugging water. You know, they're as soon as weigh-ins. So there was a very bad breakdown of something.
As a guy if I'm on time, I feel like I'm late. Like if I show up at 10 o'clock for a 10 o'clock meeting, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm just incredibly anxious about that. But like, I don't understand how 5 years of training since the last Olympics, right?
Yeah.
But your entire life, kind of similar to you, is spent doing this thing. And the hard part is the wrestling. The easy part is all the stuff you have to do just to get to the mat, right? And again, it's easy for me to be on the outside looking in at the situation to where I was like, I was hoping you were going to tell me that there was some other nefarious thing that happened. And, there was an axe to grind by this coach and all that. And then he like sabotaged his appearance, but it was like everything, like I'm sure Kyle, Dake and Jordan Burroughs, like that was the marquee matchup, but like 1B was this matchup at the Olympic trials. Like of all the Olympic trials of all the sports, that was one of the things I was looking forward to the most. And as a wrestling fan, we didn't get to see it, but like, I don't know. And I haven't heard anything from Jayden Cox since his little presser that he did right after this whole thing went down. So have you heard about kind of how he's reacted leading up to this?
He was out in Poland with us. He wrestled in Poland and seems like he's dealt with it real well. He's done a good job dealing with it. I'll give him that. I'd be mad. At myself, at my coach, at the situation. It was one of the crazier things I've ever seen in wrestling just because it shouldn't happen. It was odd, man. It was real odd, but he seems to be doing really well. I don't see any consequences. Which is crazy to me. I feel like there should have been something. USA, one of the head coaches, and their guy's late, and I don't know. They make more money than me. People making those decisions.
Well, I'm actually
see something I don't.
I'm glad they didn't, just from a standard of fairness. I'm glad that they didn't, bend some rule, because that's the exact thing. It's like if you bend, 1 minute here, you got to bend an hour the next time. And so like, I'm glad they went through and did that.
I agree. And it's a different tournament. I'd probably let him in.
Right. But
everybody wants to see him in. But
for trials, it is what it is. So you got to be responsible. And that's the extreme ownership mindset. If Jocko was here, he'd say the same thing. So before we kind of get off the Olympic thing, I
love both those guys.
Exactly.
I love both.
We're not talking trash on any of those guys. And that's the thing. It's like, those are great American athletes. And hopefully he gets his moment down the road. So we'll see how that goes. But before we move on to some of your coaching career and kind of some other stories there's a lot that's been made so far, because the ratings for the Olympics are abysmal right now, and they're not normally abysmal, right? And some people are like, oh, it's because it's not on an even numbered year, and people are used to that, and with COVID, and maybe people are busy and blah 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 and all those types of things. But I would say the people that have said it has a lot more to do with there's no cohesive unity behind the American flag and behind competing for the United States, that's why. So like for me, I'm not going to be watching the NFL this fall with all the Black Lives Matter chicanery and the Black national anthem, whatever that is, playing that before the actual national anthem and all the protests there with the NBA, like all the crap that they pulled. Like, I'm done watching that as well. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to be the best hockey fan possible. But for me as an American, as an incredibly patriotic American that looks forward to these Olympic Games every 4 years, and I guess every 2 years if you count the Winter Olympics, I'm astonished at how much play is being given to, like, the number of articles I've seen about whether or not the women's basketball team is going to protest or not during the Olympics or the run up to the Olympics or anything like that. I'm like, is that what we're really talking about? Yeah. We're not talking about their chances at gold. We're not talking about the teams that are going to challenge them for supremacy in the sport. This is what we're talking about. You have Gwen Berry, a hammer thrower who got third place in the trials, who is lucky to even be an Olympian. She's somehow one of the heroes of the Olympics because she refused to turn and salute the flag of the United States of America during the national anthem. She refused to be respectful for 90 seconds of her life. For you as an Olympian, for somebody who's not only a patriotic American, but somebody whose job it was to represent the United States of America professionally with the rings on your jumpsuit and the American flag, what does it feel like for you to see these athletes that are doing these things and protesting the country they claim to be representing?
It's hard for me. The first thing I did when we got to Olympic Village, I put my flag in my window. I hung the American flag, and I still have it. I had everybody on the team sign it. It's one of my like keepsakes I really like. So it's really hard for me. I just, man, it's rough to watch, and I don't like. It seems right now, culturally, like it's all about having enemies, all about blaming somebody, and like the news, and it's maybe a nefarious thought, but rather than the Olympics has always brought people together. It's about coming together. Look, we can compete and still come together, be on the same page, cheer together. It was one of my wife's favorite parts of it. Right. She's in the stands cheering, and Iran's right next to him cheering, and they're cheering with each other and helping and high-fiving, and that doesn't happen.
No.
And actually, I think it happens more than people want to admit. Not people, but whatever, the man. They want enemies, and it seems like that's the big push. Where normally in the Olympics, it's very much look how they're doing, look all good weathered stories. This person they had a rough upbringing, they made the Olympic team, and this person did this, and look how they've come together, and this one's very much like everything being pushed is divisive. It's how are they gonna do this, and I can't believe they did that, and the ratings are down. That's not what Olympics is about. People don't want to see that, and they don't want to hear that. We get enough of it, especially the last few years. That's all it's been is divisiveness, and I think that's why. I really think that's why the Olympics aren't a big deal right now. It's still getting pushed at the one thing that's supposed to. And throughout history, sports has always been what brings us out of stuff. You had the Great Depression, you had the racing, you had the boxing that was, you weren't supposed to be doing it, and they found a way, and the betting, and it's always helped. Sports is what helps people get through hard times, and we have the sports, and we're not being allowed to use it as a way to get out, to get away from all the divisiveness. That's my word right now. And I hate seeing it. I absolutely hate seeing it. And yeah, it's frustrating. It really is. And I'm a little bit devil's advocate. I think you said it in your podcast, like made a bunch of money as soon as she did that. Like if I'm an athlete and fame's what I'm supposed to be trying to get, here's a way I can be famous where if I hadn't done this, nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows who she was till she does that. And I get it. I get why they're doing it. It's what we say as a culture, like this is what you should do. This is how you become famous. Right. And famous is the best, make lots of money. That's the best. And I just don't, sports is supposed to be the way to get away from that, to remind you.
Right. And Sam, I don't want to be hyperbolic. And, whenever I make a prediction about the future on my podcast, I try to provide some caveats and different things like that.
Sure.
But I feel like if we seed sports, and the cat may already be out of the bag here with this, if we can't rally around sports, professional sports, college sports, Olympic sports, whatever, that is one of the things that will lead to the downfall of this country, because we don't have a reprieve or a rest period from the craziness of the divisiveness of left and right, or Republican and Democrat, or liberal and conservative. Like, we don't have that separation anymore, because guess what? When your wife is high-fiving another wife from Iran, you know what they're not thinking about? The Iran nuclear deal, right? They're not thinking about,
that's absolutely right.
the potential of, their state-sponsored terrorism and what we're trying to do to combat that, right? Well, in an American context, right? If you're rooting for the Buffalo Bills or the St. Louis Cardinals or the, University of Texas Longhorns, I just brought that up because you're wearing the OU shirt. But if you're rooting for those people, you're not rooting for them.
Are horns not allowed now?
Yeah, you can do it in the studio if you want to, but there's no video, so we'll never know if it actually happened. But like, that's the thing, is like, you're not a Texas fan who's also wearing a Bernie Sanders sticker or a MAGA hat or something like that. You're a Texas fan, right? You're a Cardinals fan. You're this fan. You're that fan. And we've gotten to this point now where you can't even do that.
Yeah.
You can't sit in the stands next to somebody that disagrees with you about potentially a super minute political issue. Yeah. So it's like, hey, mate, this person disagrees on tax policy, so I can't be associated with them in any way, shape, or form. And there's no things that, and again, I'm a walking contradiction in that. I just did a podcast on my university changing their fight song and, kind of going at it and like trying to figure that out. But it's like, how can you support an entity that claims to be neutral and claims to be something for everybody when they're doing something that is so divisive? I'm stealing your word of the day kind of a thing. But it is, for me, it is a rough thing, because I want Americans to be able to rally around our teams and around our female and male athletes. And it's just really, really hard to do, because for me, I'm finding myself cheering against the United States women's soccer team. And by the time this episode comes out, who knows if they moved on to the next round or if they've been eliminated or whatever. But I want Megan Rapinoe. I don't want her to get injured. I'm not going to wish injury on her, but I want them to get smoked in every single game, because they're disrespecting the country they claim to represent, right? Nike making their, warm-ups to say Black Lives Matter. And again, Black Lives Matter, the sentence makes perfect sense, but Black Lives Matter, the organization, is an evil organization whose ideologies are founded in Marxism, which goes back to basically atheism and Satanism and all those different things. So now I'm kind of getting off, and I'm kind of like recording my own podcast here. Let's kind of get back to the stuff you're doing. You got me all hot and bothered now, right? And you're just answering the stuff the way you should be answering it. But, it's good to kind of hear that perspective from a former USA athlete. But you have eventually, you're technically now, I guess, retired from actually competing, and you've moved on to coaching, which is kind of a common thing for a lot of people
Those
to do.
Those who can't coach.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but you did, and you can coach now. So obviously there's a lot of differences between being a competitor and being a coach. And I feel like it would be unfair right now, since you're still so early in your coaching journey, to ask you which one that you like better. Because obviously, I figured you would just say competing. But as a coach, what are the things that you like about coaching? Is there anything that has surprised you? Have you taken to it like a duck to water? Like, what is it about coaching that was kind of appealing to you and is keeping you attached to it?
I love it. My dad did it. I always knew I'd coach when I was done. So I like to think it's been a smooth transition for me. Some of the things that are hard, like my pride will get involved now and then, wrestling, and it'll be all something that's about me. Like, I got to beat them, let them know. And to a degree, you need that. To a degree, it's kind of surprising me when it happens, because I'm not that way. And so it surprises me when anytime that comes out. And but I really love helping give direction. Wrestling, what's great about wrestling is anybody can do it. Everybody can do it. We got guys without a leg winning. We have big guys, little guys, long guys, short guys. We have it all. And so it's fun helping steer them, because you don't want to steal what they're good at. They got to college for a reason. They're going for a world Olympic medal for a reason. They did this that made them real good, but you want to shave that time off. I want to tell them, like, being up with 20 seconds left's a good thing. Don't start thinking it's not. Right. You don't want a year there of missed time. You're trying to help them find their path without stepping in the same potholes you stepped in, and knowing, like, they can't do it the exact same way I did. Very few guys wrestle the exact same way I did. And that's a lot of fun to me, trying to keep their what makes them unique and got them there while getting rid of all the bad things. Is a lot of fun. And, I do a lot of Little League stuff. I help out Little League. My son's in it, and it's part of my role, RTC. I want to help out the whole state. I'm not just an an OU wrestling coach, right? I'm
right. And so RTC is a regional training center.
Yeah.
And so you are a coach with OU, but
Yes.
you do more things than just coach collegiately.
Correct. I'm the guy that helps when they're done with college and they want to make the Olympic team. That's me. I help them make Olympic teams. And so I also help high school kids that want to be on that and little league kids that want to be on that path to make an Olympic team. I help steer them toward the right people, and it's kind of my job. And I like the little league because you can do a lot more in their life. Like I can set them on, help them get on the right path early. Where college, you're kind of set in your ways.
Sure.
You know, I will say college, you make big decisions, and we can help with that, which I like. That's you're starting to make the really big decisions in life, and we can be a shoulder to lean on and an ear, and we can talk to them a little and help guide them there, which I really enjoy too, because it's more than just wrestling. It's
right
on the mat, it's in life, it's what we do.
Absolutely. So one thing about coaching, and you and I have talked about this several times off air, and I actually asked that of Hardell Moore, who was previously on this, the concept of young boys wrestling young girls. And so I think if I can, remember exactly, Hardell was very, very okay with that. Like, hey, it just is what it is. If that's the person that's in your bracket, that's the person that you're going to have to wrestle. But for me, as the father of a now 15-month-old boy who will very, very likely get into wrestling, we're not going to require our kids to play particular sports, but we are going to require them to play sports, and we are going to push them towards things like wrestling and jiu-jitsu. I have some issues with that personally, because we're trying to teach these young boys to model what it is to be a man, and a man doesn't physically dominate a woman. Now, there are scenarios like if a woman breaks into my house in the middle of the night and she's trying to physically dominate, like at that point, I'm going to hit a woman. I'm just going to be real honest with it. But there aren't a whole lot of other scenarios like that, right? The break in the middle of the night, they're trying to kill my family thing. Yeah, I think it's okay for you to hit a woman at that point. I don't think God's going to be mad at you. But for me, whenever you are trying to teach your 8-year-old son that you're to honor women and you're not to, physically dominate them, you're to protect them, but then also you're doing a very physically dominant sport where it's like, it's just you and them, you're in singlets, and you're saying, go and dominate that female. It's not the same as baseball, because if you're a pitcher and a girl comes up to the plate, you're not physically doing anything to them directly. You might hit them with the ball on accident, but you're not doing anything physically to them directly. So for me, I haven't fully fleshed out my opinions, but in my head, I think I would be more comfortable with my son forfeiting those matches and possibly for those few years that he would actually be competing against girls while they're more physically developed and there aren't as many guys or young boys in the bracket. But from your perspective, what are your thoughts? And I guess for you growing up and for your son with wrestling girls when you're in kind of those younger age brackets, how do you feel about that?
So growing up was absolutely not allowed to.
And that was from your dad. Your dad straight up said no.
Matches, tournaments, and thankfully it never happened. I never had to wrestle a girl. I had a couple in my bracket at times, but we never met up. And I agree. I think it's a big topic, and I lean toward no. I need to flesh it out. Like I really need to sit down, think about it. But it seems to me, all the reasons you gave are absolutely right. I'm teaching my son to respect women. I want him holding the door open for girls. I'm old school. I'm
old school chivalry.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. And at the same time, most sports, guys with guys, girls with girls, and wrestling's finally coming around to that. We have girls leagues, we have girls teams, we have girls state, and I'm 100% in. Like I want my daughter to wrestle. When I was a kid, girls weren't supposed to wrestle. That was my dad's rule. Like girls shouldn't wrestle, and I've changed my mind on that. I think girls should wrestle. I want my daughter to wrestle. It won't bother me if she don't.
Yeah, exactly.
But if she wants to go wrestle, like let's go. You could be the third generation. Let's go get it, girl. But guys wrestling girls, I don't personally, I don't like it, and I think it shouldn't happen. Guys should wrestle guys, girls should wrestle girls. It's pretty simple. That's how it works in every sport.
Well, you say it's not fully fleshed out yet, but let's take the scenario of your son, who's how old now? He's 7, right? So he's right at that age where, you're doing the tournaments and he's like, obviously he's done those before. he's in a bracket and, a girl ends up on the other side of the bracket. We know what your dad's rule is. What's your rule?
I don't know, to be honest. And it hadn't happened, so I haven't. I would lean toward, like, if it right now it happened, I'd probably be like, no, can't wrestle her.
Okay.
But like my dad, I would let him keep wrestling, and if they meet, they meet. Then we have to make that choice. But until that comes, we're not pulling him out of a tournament because there's a girl in his bracket.
So with that in mind, I guess the one thing I would encourage you to do, which, here's some advice you didn't ask for, is like, you should probably figure that out before that time comes, because, I know for me, when I've been put in the heat of a moment, sometimes I make good decisions. Other times I don't. And it's like, it was because I didn't spend enough time beforehand thinking about it. But let's play this out just a little bit. Let's say this does happen, whether you thought about it beforehand or thought about it in the moment, and you say, no, I'm not going to let my son wrestle against this girl. And he gets upset. He's disappointed. Like, maybe this is the gold medal match. Like, maybe this was, a very important tournament for them. So now Sam Hazewinkel, the dad, because you're always Sam Hazewinkel, the dad. You're not always Sam Hazewinkel, the coach, but you're Sam Hazewinkel, the dad. How do you explain that to your son in a way that they would understand? Like, what would be maybe your advice to guys that are listening to this, who maybe have kids that are, maybe they've had some of these same ideas and thoughts?
Yeah. I think I would do like my dad and keep it simple, keep it black and white. Boys don't wrestle girls. We don't wrestle girls, and keep it simple. It doesn't need to be.
But Daddy, why?
Yeah.
But Daddy, why? Like, what do you say?
I think there's arguments on both sides, and I say we don't. What, for a lot of the reasons you said, we don't. We respect women, and I'll be honest with them. Like, that's what my dad did, and I don't have a reason yet to change it. I haven't been convinced otherwise. And I know a lot of guys I respect that are all for it. And so that's why I say I think it's an issue that there's maybe some argument on that I would need to think out. The good news is Josh could care less.
Yeah.
He would be like, sweet, let's go home. I want to play Beyblades. He is not into wrestling yet. And to what you were asking earlier, I make him wrestle. He has to go to practice. You're not allowed to quit in the middle of a season, and you got to do it.
You got to finish.
Yeah, you're still young. I'm telling you what to do. This is what we're doing. But we're doing that with any sport.
Sure.
He starts soccer. He doesn't want to do soccer halfway through the season. You got to finish the season.
Right.
I even put him in basketball once, which was.
For those of you that can't see right now, so Sam Hazewinkel is one of the toughest human beings I know, but he is not exactly one of the tallest human beings I've ever seen. So there's not a whole lot of guys your size that end up as point guards in the NBA. Even John Stockton, everyone thought he was a midget. That dude was decently tall. Chris Paul, like these guys are decently tall.
Short, there was what's his name?
Muggsy Bogues or Spud Webb.
Spud.
Yeah, right. So,
but they were taller than me.
Yeah, they were a little bit taller. So just for our listeners, how tall are you?
Oh man, well,
I got to ask Ari. Hey,
how tall do I feel?
No. I don't care about how you feel. Right? It's kind of like your gender. I don't really care how you feel about it.
I don't know, 5'5".
Right,
5'5".
But I'm just going to go ahead and say this for any of you out there thinking that you're going to cackle at that. You're the baddest 5'5" guy on the planet, right? That. So there you go. It's like you're the guy.
I think so.
Okay, I think so as well. So I do want to kind of tee you up for this because I've heard you tell a really crazy story whenever you were overseas and you were there for a wrestling competition. And so I'm just going to back away from the mic because I've heard this before, but I want you to regale our audience here with this insane story. So ready, set, go.
Okay. So I show up in Denver and we're flying over to Serbia, and we had a coach on staff at the time that was from Serbia, and he's not going, which probably should have been a flag. Flag should have went off.
Yeah.
That guy's not, he's like a god there. He was a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, and he's not going, and the head of USA Wrestling shows up, and he's like, guys, if you don't want to go, you don't have to. The embassy's saying you shouldn't go overseas. Shouldn't go to Serbia. But hey, man, Dave Schultz, he would go to Russia when it was USSR, and you weren't allowed to do that. He's America's greatest wrestler.
Right.
And so we're wrestling, and I'm like, well, man, Dave Schultz did it, and well, I'm not going to be the first one to raise my hand. If anybody else says, no, they're not doing it, I'll join them. But if everybody's going, like, can't be that big of a deal. No one raised their hand, so we all go over. And to be fair, we had the Navy coach with us, so we got a military guy with us. So I wasn't overly concerned. And we show up. We got our police escorts, which is not uncommon. Depending on where you go in the country, you have police escorts. And they have AKs. That's a little less common. Usually they just have their guns, but AKs, but all right, still not terribly uncommon. Seen that before. Everywhere we go, we got them. Now we're going to our last practice. It's it's 5 p.m. We're going to do this practice. Tomorrow morning is weigh-ins. And 5 p.m., we're going and we pull over on the side of the highway. And they're like, well, big protest today, and they found out Americans were using the university, and they've surrounded the university. It's no problem. It's like, no problem. Yeah, okay, no problem. We're sitting on the side of the highway. Well, Greyhound buses are going by, and before you know it, the highway's starting to back up. And we realize, it's everybody going to this protest, and it's all like college-age kids because that's protests, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's what happens when you don't have sports and you got all this excess energy. You got to go spend it somewhere. And so there's these buses, and they're going by, and one of them I'm kind of looking, and he holds up a what was it? A pirate flag that had USA and duct tape with an X through it, upside down. And I'm like, oh man. And everybody, we're from Canada, right? Let's practice. Oh, Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
This is getting bad. And about that time, the cops come back and they're like, okay, we're good to go. We go to the university. Sure enough, no one there. Cut weight. We're good. Go home. Cutting weight. All right. So we can't drink and fluids like the normal. You take a shower, you flip on the TV, and it's always in another language, but you watch, and every channel is like a building on fire. We're like, man, there's not even anything on TV. This stinks. And coach comes walking by the room, and he's just like, what do you mean? Well, get someone to beep over here. We need a beep, 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 beep. He's off on down the hallway. Like, that was weird. Yep, still building's on fire. So then coach comes by again. He's like, listen, fellas, we're leaving the country right now. The protest became a riot. The American embassy's on fire. They're trying to kill everybody, and all the military is getting the diplomats out. Like, we have no help. We're on our own. And we're sitting there like, no. We're cutting weight. We're wrestling tomorrow. Right. You're like, no, we're leaving right now. We're like, no. He's like, listen, pack up. We're like, can we eat? Like, if we're not wrestling, let's eat. So then you start drinking fluid, and you're kind of half packing. And once you get some fluids in you and some food, you're like,
feeling good.
Oh, this is real.
Yeah,
like,
it's getting real now.
You kind of realize what's going on. And so we pack up, and we already couldn't stay in the city because everything going on. And we're in this little town where they would come by every morning and throw coal out front, just a big pile of just coal. And they'd throw it in the furnace down low, and the power was on 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Well, we're loading up, boom, power goes off the whole city, like the town, whatever. So we're finishing loading up in the dark because there's no power. And no, like hyperbole, we take actual dirt roads out of Serbia into Turkey, through whatever those mountains are. And it takes forever because we're on dirt roads. There's nothing just straight. You're winding and through the hills. And we get pulled over 3 times by like security patrol and border patrol, whatever. Each time they make us all get out. They got like AKs pointed at us, line up against the bus. They go through all our gear, load it back up, put us back in. Each time we're like, we're in the middle of nowhere, like out in the mountains. If one of these people, so Serbia had Texas decides to leave the U.S. and Serbia's like, yeah, we're on Texas side. So whatever state in Serbia was trying to leave Serbia, and the U.S., I don't know who the U.S. was backing. Yeah. But we were on the opposite, like in the bad area, where you don't want to be a U.S. person. And so we're leaving, and we're thinking like, if these guys are on the other side, like we're done. Like they're going to get us. Yeah. And thank the Lord, none of them were. We made it to Turkey, and I wrestled so good in Turkey. Like,
there you go.
That was by far the best I ever wrestled. I crushed everybody. It's just great to be alive, and what's crazy, we didn't have cell phones back then. Like, there were cell phones. Nobody owned a cell phone, and so you would do a collect call, and Rachel's at work or at church, and somebody's like, hey, so how's your husband? Like, yeah, they burned down the American embassy, and they're trying to get everybody out of the country, and there's hostages. And she's like, what? And shame on USA Wrestling. Nobody called our families. Yeah. And we're in the back roads, so she didn't get to find out for a couple days. And finally we get a collect call home, and I'm like, yep, I'm safe. I'm okay. I don't like nothing to worry about. And again, very surreal. Like, going through it was surreal. And I don't think we realized the kind of danger we were in. And So now I tell kids, the good coach I am, if the head of USA Wrestling shows up, don't go. It's one tournament. You'll be okay.
All for the love of wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, it was the love of wrestling that almost got your head taken off. So.
Yeah. Dave Schultz did it.
Hey,
the USSR.
But we're glad you're here. We're glad you made it out alive.
Glad I made it out. It's a good story now.
Before we wrap up and go into our last section, you'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that part of the reason why you and I are connected is because you and I go to the same church. Like, you are a member of my foxhole. You are Sam the coach, as per my foxhole episode 104. We've trained together a few times. Yeah. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it very much. But we've trained together, done some wrestling and done a little bit of jujitsu as well. But one of the defining things about you is not just your athletic exploits, it's your Christian faith. And I will say that you and I own the same Bible, the ESV Study Bible.
Yeah, there you go.
But yours is quite a bit more worn than mine is. And I don't know if that's just by virtue of the fact that I printed books. I try to, really keep them pristine. I don't really like writing in them or highlighting, but that is something that, just watching you, being in Sunday school, sitting at the same table doing those things, you are constantly looking at the scriptures. And so I don't know if that's just for play or for show because you're in Sunday school or whatever thing is. I get the sense that that's not the case, but talk to me a little bit about your Christian faith and because you mentioned at the top of the show that you're very religious and, that could be taken about a million different ways, but, talk about your Christian faith and, whether or not for you that has an impact on what you do in wrestling as a competitor or a coach.
Yes. So I'm a Christ follower and it's very much part of it. My dad was too. So I'm second generation Olympian and third generation Christian, which the older I've gotten, I realized, man, that's rare. There's not a lot of third generation Christians. And so I'm very blessed in that way. And it was a big part of my dad's philosophy. And so it's become a big part of mine is we look through the filter of the Bible and then wrestling for whatever in life. That's how we do it. We look at what the Bible says. We look at what wrestling says. And that's all my philosophy in wrestling comes to that. The Bible says, give 100% heart, mind, soul to what you're doing and do it for God. So my wrestling, I give 100%. Heart, mind, soul, and I do it to glorify God. He gave me these abilities, and so I'm not trying to wrestle for me, which we all do. We're all,
Sure.
And to a degree, that's good. You should wrestle for yourself. You want to go win, but I try to keep it that I'm wrestling for Jesus. Like I'm trying to showcase the abilities He's given me, the situation He put me in, and I just want to be, showing others to Jesus. That's my goal, and I use it very much in every part of wrestling, every part of it. And when you're sitting at home, you can always think of all the ways that you do it, and anytime somebody asks, it's always hard to come up with one. But there's plenty of them. Maybe they'll come to me here as we talk, but
no, that's good. And that's the thing about it is to work unto the Lord is a hard thing for people that hate what they're doing. Right. And so to any of those of you that are listening, just as a little aside, I know your job might suck. I know your boss might be a pain in the neck. I know that, perhaps you're not making as much as you want, or you're not at the station in life within your career that you thought you would be at by this point. But when you change your mindset to work unto the Lord, it changes not only your gas tank, it changes, the focus of what you're doing. And so I think that's something that you kind of touched on a little bit is that, you're not just training for you, even though you are training for you. You're not just training to impress people, even though you are training to impress people, your coaches or your teammates or whatever. Your training is unto the Lord. You're training to serve in the way that you're serving. And so you're going to be the best competitor you can be because that was your job. Now you're trying to be the best coach that you can be because that is your job. And the impact that you're going to have on people could have a ripple effect that you may never even realize. And so that's a very, very important thing for all of you is carry the gospel wherever you go. I just talked about, hanging out with Phil Robertson and he's marinated in the gospel. That guy the gospel just spews out of him whenever necessary, right? And even when it's not necessary, he just kind of still throws it out there. So that's a big deal. I appreciate you sharing that with us. But we are going to come down to the end of our show here, and we're going to do for the first time live the segment called What Would You Say to Someone That Said? So since you're a listener of the podcast, this is lightning round, all right? So I'm going to throw out these random statements to you. They're going to start with what would you say to someone that said? I will end the statement, but you got 30 seconds tops, right? You got 30 seconds to give me your answer. So you up for it?
I am up for it if you let me ask you a couple first.
Well, this is my show. Like, you can't just like switch it up on. He's got his notepad. For those of you that can't see this, he's got his notepad out. Yeah, I feel like you were prepared for this.
I came prepared. I tried to.
Okay, well, yeah, sure. Why not? Here, yeah, you go ahead and take over my show. I was trying to launch into my last segment here, but yeah, sure. You go ahead and take over, Sam. Go for it.
Okay. What would you say to somebody that said redheads are stepchildren for a reason that nobody wants to claim them?
Well, I would say that redheads are obviously a walking genetic deformity. And so that is what I am. I've accepted it. I have no soul. It is what it is.
Ding. Right. Correct answer.
Okay.
What would you say to somebody who said alpha males are toxicity and they had their chance to lead and now they need to step aside because betas are the new alphas?
Betas are not the new alphas. And I will tell you that these betas will be looking around for the alphas when things are hitting the fan, right? Because it's easy to be a sheep when the wolves aren't around. But whenever the wolf shows up, the sheep will be looking for a sheepdog.
Nice. Would you rather?
If you're going to do my segment, you got to do it right. You got to say, what would you say to someone that said? Come on now.
Okay.
You're sitting here like, I can't even read your questions because your chicken scratches on the other side. What are we doing here?
I'm trying to decide which one here. All right.
You can ask all of them. I got mine ready to go. We'll eventually get to mine.
There we go. Eventually. We'll
okay.
do it. And I'm trying to think of my answers for yours so I don't look like an idiot.
Well, you don't know what I'm going to ask you now. I'm going to throw you out a bunch of stupid ones now.
Great. Who's tougher? What would you say to somebody that said that the clown is tougher than the bull rider?
Oh, man, that's a really good question. I would say that I would disagree with them because the clown has to deal with the bull from a distance, but the bull rider has to hop on top of that thing. And so the clown is in trouble, and those are some brave SOBs, even though they look like clowns because they are dressed like clowns. But I would say the guy that's actually have to get on the back of the bull, that's a little bit of a tougher situation.
Well, you'd be wrong. So
okay, you're not even going to explain to me why I'm wrong. You're just going to go to the next one. Okay, yeah, great. This is going wonderful.
That's it. What would you say? It's the last one. What would you say to someone that said, I could beat you and my at the same time?
You could be, say that again. I don't know. Say that again. I'm going to make you say that again.
What would you say to somebody that said, I could beat you and my at the same time?
I'm not even going to dignify that answer with a full, or that question with a full response. Yeah. How dare you ask me such a ridiculous question?
Yeah, it worked on me. I got asked that once when I was like, you can't turn me. And they asked me and I was like, what did you? And I got turned. I was like, it was well done.
That reminds me of a time when I was training with, shout out to Tyler Murrah, who is a brown belt IBJJF world champion in jiu-jitsu. He's been since promoted to black belt. But early on in my jiu-jitsu career, I'm trying to go crazy. We're about the same size, type of thing. And I'm going crazy. I'm trying to like do whatever. And I'm a white belt. He literally was in such control. He reaches over to off the mat where his water bottle was. And I'm going to do this next to the mic so you can hear it. He unscrews his water bottle, takes a sip, takes the time to screw the cap back on, set it down. All the while I'm trying to get out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to sweep. I'm trying to escape. He was in such control. He had time to take a break in the middle of a roll. So Tyler, I love you, but screw you forever. I hate you for embarrassing me like that. But I'm going to take back over, Sam. This is my show. All right.
I'm going to comment on that. One of my lines I like using to mess with the college guys that are, getting better, but I'll be like, yeah, I know what you're going to do before you know what you're going to do. And sometimes it's true. Like I can see it in their eye. Here it comes, and you get to have some fun with it. So,
hey, even just saying that to them, that's a little bit of a screwy thing inside the mind. So it's a good trick that you're playing. But
that too.
Now,
coaching,
now, Sam, you settle down there. We're going to go into my side. Okay.
Let's go.
Are you ready? Sam Hazewinkel, what would you say to someone that said, I would wrestle, but I don't like the idea of sweaty men grabbing all over me?
Well, you shouldn't be in wrestling. They're not ready for it.
I've heard that from a lot of people before. They give the same answer for jiu-jitsu.
That's what breaks you, then you probably shouldn't wrestle.
All right, here we go. What would you say to someone that said, I would wrestle, but singlets are really awkward?
I would say you're kind of right, a little bit right, but they're there for a reason. Fingers don't get tore up, and no shirt. Might look better. We might have more fans if we just had fight shorts, but it gets slippery quick. It gets really weird, and you got a face full of. Then now you are talking about like, what's the movie? The guy that does jump shot and he gets the belly of face. Nobody wants that happening.
Along Came Polly, I think
that's
is
the one.
All right, here we go. What would you say to someone that said, Cale Sanderson is the greatest collegiate wrestler of all time?
I would disagree. I think Kyle Dake is, and here's my reasoning, because I have this argument a lot. I think we'll have somebody go undefeated 4-time before we have somebody win at 4 different weights again.
All right. What would you say to someone that said Cael Sanderson will go down as the greatest collegiate wrestling coach of all time?
I would say he is very much on track for that. Eventually somebody will beat him, but for a while, I would say yes.
All right. What would you say to someone that said John Smith is the greatest American freestyle wrestler of all time?
It's a really hard argument. Bruce Baumgartner, I think, is probably a little bit better. But there's arguments for John. I'm going to go Bruce, though.
Okay. All right. Just a few more left here. What would you say to someone that said wrestling is the most important discipline in mixed martial arts?
I would say they are correct.
I'm going to ask you.
I'm biased.
Give me a little bit more on that.
I'm biased. I think a bunch of the champs, if you look historically, the last few years, are wrestling is I'd say their main, and there's ones that say it and they're not. And there's a lot of wrestlers that go out that don't make it. So there's arguments all the way around, but I would say yes. I would say if I'm getting my son ready to be UFC champ and I'm not worried about his wrestling, wrestling would be our main thing we do growing up.
All right. 2 more. What would you say to someone that said a great jiu-jitsu player will always beat a great wrestler?
I'd probably laugh and think it's a joke. I wrote it down in my journal.
Okay.
You said a funny joke today.
Yeah, whatever.
I give a lot. When they know what they're doing, it's rough. And I love it. I love that part of jiu-jitsu because it's just different. It's different than wrestling. And I love the mindset. I love the learning. And I love that it's less injury intensive, unless you're against an idiot that just throws on a bar arm and tries to break your elbow. As long as you're not rolling with an idiot, I love that it fits real well for wrestlers as we're aging. It's something we can jump into and enjoy. And I'm excited to see it grow. I'd love to hear how they're going to get it like into schools. I think it would help a lot. Like judo's not in schools, wrestling is. Jiu-jitsu's not. We need more combat sports in school. And I think it's one that could fit in because of that the injuries are lower and anybody can do it. And I don't know, that's a pet peeve of mine, but I'd love to see it get in.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu seems like a perfect Olympic sport, considering some of the Olympic sports that I've seen. That one seems to be the best one, but we are at the last and probably the most important question of the day.
Most important question of the day.
You ready?
Ready.
Okay. What would you say to someone that said the coolest thing about wrestling is the cauliflower ears?
I'd say they're probably right. And I'm so happy because back in the day, it wasn't. When I was a kid, no, cauliflower ears were bad, and now they're good, and I love that. I love that they're seen as like a trophy because that's the way we always look at it. It's like the trophy you can carry everywhere. So yes, they are right. That's one of them, one of the top 3.
It is the international symbol for don't mess with me.
Yeah,
I've done things before that you would probably not appreciate. So
I've done it to people like that have like road rage or something. I'll like point at my ear at them. I don't think it ever works, but in my mind, I'm like, yeah.
I'd say it's a deterrent. It's a pretty good deterrent. But Sam, we have gone everywhere in this conversation. We've talked about a lot of different things. So I appreciate you giving us this amount of time, but that is all for me. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest?
Oh man. Check out Undaunted.Life. I love it. Everybody I talk to that starts listening loves it. And spread the word. I will say one other thing.
Yeah.
Part of my job is fundraising. That's easily the hardest part for me. I love the wrestling part. If you're interested in helping wrestlers achieve their Olympic goals, we'll have it in the show notes, but okrtc.org. That's OK like Oklahoma, RTC like Regional Training Center, okrtc.org. We need all the help we can get. You can help us. You can help kids reach their goals and learn how to be successful both in wrestling and in life, and because that's our biggest thing. The odds of someone making the Olympic team very low. The odds of them learning how to be successful in life very high. And I'll finish with that. It's something that I preach, going back to the Bible. Jesus tells a parable about the master, and he's going to leave, and he gives the gold talents like a year's worth of wages. And he gives 1 5 and 1 3 and 1 2 and or 5 2 and 1, and he leaves, and when he comes back, The guy that had 5 turned it into 10. The guy that had 2 turned it into 4. And the guy that had 1 hit it. And it seems very appropriate to life and to wrestling. You know, some of us, and I love that it's talents. I love that that's what it transfers over into English. We're all given talents, you know, and some people are going to be better. I could do basketball. I could do everything right. And LeBron James is going to beat me
every time.
Every time. He's got more talents. And as a coach, I can tell you that the guys that, whether they have a great aptitude for wrestling, they have 5 or they only have 2, but they go out and they give everything they got, they are in their best. That is the best chance for them to succeed in wrestling. It's not cheating. It's not trying to do something you don't have. It's being the best at what you have. And the master's proud. Master's proud of the one of the 5. He's proud of the one of the 2.
Right.
What he's mad about is the one that hit it, that had this talent, and like we're worried and scared and fearful. And I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do at the OKRTC. You know, we are looking to teach kids to use the talents they have. If we can grow a few more on that and find success and realize some people just have more. You know, some people are just better, and it's amazing how many people don't. Right? They don't use their talents. And that guy with 5, and then you had the guy with 3 that turned it into 6, and the 5 is just sitting on his 5. That guy with less beats him because he was willing to put in the effort and get better. And he's never going to beat the LeBron James that did it right. You know, some people are just they're better at they're made for it. You know, but they have the opportunity and they're going to find success. And I find that's true in whatever you're doing, whether
Right.
you're a dishwasher or a podcaster or a wrestling coach. If you're taking the abilities and talents you've been given them and you're doing your best with those, if you're trying to double them, if you will, you're going to be successful. You're going to be successful, you know?
I agree with that. That's a great thing to end on. Sam Hazewinkel, thanks for coming on Undaunted Life, a Man's Podcast.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Kyle.
There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Sam Hazewinkel. And guys, hey, he is in my foxhole, all right? You can't have him. He's my friend, okay? Before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. As you know by now, at Undaunted Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness. And specifically, we do that by giving you guys content like this podcast that helps you forge spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So for today, I've got one link for you. That is a link to the Oklahoma Regional Training Center. That is where Sam is the head coach. We talked about it in the show. If you are a supporter of wrestling and you want the love and grandeur of wrestling to get out to more kids, make sure you go to okrtc.org. That is in the show notes. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive review. If you want me to come speak at your live event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok and like us on Facebook. You can also check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. We also want to thank the band August Burns Red for allowing us to use their music for our content. The intro-outro track on this podcast is their song Cutting the Ties, which is off their 10th anniversary re-recording of their album Leveler. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.